guys will get ready to go. But yeah, I would love to.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. In the interest of brevity, we need to vacate again at 5 o'clock. We have a previous engagement. So welcome to the special meeting of the Cambria Community Services District Board. I'd like to call the meeting to order, and please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I see that we have a quorum. Now, again, for those that are used to going to our regular meetings, this is a special meeting, and as a special meeting, you can address the board on any subject described in this notice. So if you just want to talk about general things, we'd be glad to hear those at our meeting on the 21st, which is just a few weeks from now. So with that in mind, let's see, I have 3 pieces to speak really on the item 3A. Do we have any others? 2 others. Written comments, got it. The item on personnel you can handle, Mr. Blanc, on 2 on.
It's on this project.
Okay, personnel on this project. So why don't we call it? Which item are you talking about? It's 3A or 3B? How about 4?
It's on 4B.
4B, okay, good. We'll get you then. So,
But I'd like to talk about it now because it's a procedural issue.
sure, go ahead.
Thank you.
Mr. LeBlanc. And we'll call that 4A out of turn. I'll just. Please begin.
Okay, Lou Blanc, professional geologist and geophysicist, certified engineering geologist and hydrogeologist, also a trainer for the California Emergency Management Agency. First thing I'd like to point out is that board members need to be very, very careful on this loan for this project to make sure that they don't have a conflict of interest, either some financial gain that they will receive as a result of this project or political gain. Those kinds of things you need to be very, very careful that you're not going to get as a result of this, indirectly or directly. Also, there's a potential issue, as I brought up before, with the representation of the attorney because of a Hearst connection and the potential nexus between this project and Hearst. And board members may not be getting advice from the council for the district about their issues such as personal liability. So I suggest that you all take a look at your own attorney's advice before you act on something like this. I don't believe this should be agendized, and I'm seriously concerned about who makes up the agenda, whether it be the general manager or the president, because this project does not have a description. We don't know what the ultimate project is going to look like. It doesn't have approval from the government agencies, and you don't know how much it's going to cost. And yet you're looking at taking out loans for this project. I think this is tantamount to what happened in Bell, California. My father was a 33-year judge advocate, general officer in the military. I spoke to him a little bit about what's happening here. He said that this is a court-martial offense. That is, if they didn't line you up in front of a firing squad and take care of you for other reasons. There's really serious issues you're dealing with here. And although I know your egos are wrapped up in this project, and some of you might actually believe this is for the benefit of the people here, it isn't. It is for other people's benefit, but not for the people that live in Cambria. This is going to hurt us, and this is going to hurt our community. And I really think you should be pulling this off the agenda and get your ducks in a row before you move forward with this. I have friends in prison named Bubba that are looking forward to meet you if you go forward with this. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. That was pretty particularly toward the item 3A, so we have other people that are interested in talking on 3A. And I'll have the public comment first, and then I'll have the general manager introduce the item. Christine Hendricks, followed by Arthur Zacks, I'm sorry.
Yes, I would like to make remarks in concert with Professor Blanc's remarks. I don't understand why this financing is on the agenda. Even the agenda includes further comments from other agencies regarding the legality of this project. It's so questionable that there's no way that this project should be going forward to encumbering the community with over $9 million in debt plus interest. We can certainly deal with the details of that, the financing as well, but I disagree with having this. I don't think this should be under discussion until we have some kind of agreement on a project and the agencies that are involved have an opportunity to meet with the board and with the staff and get this straightened out. The initial negative declaration that was submitted was deficient in so many ways. I'm embarrassed to think that Cambria would present this as a professional document, and I think that that's something that should go back to staff and to the attorney to be gone over, because this was so far outside what is legal and what is required. Thank you.
Thank you. Arthur Zacks, followed by Patrice Wise.
Good afternoon. My name is Arthur Zacks, and I'm a resident of Cambria. I have just one question. If the California Coastal Commission blocks the completion of this project, which is likely, then what are the legal liabilities of the CCSD to the lender? And why is this board rushing headlong into a loan for a project that will likely never be completed and will never be up and running? That's my question.
Thank you. Although we don't respond necessarily to each item, if you were available at the June 14th meeting, I think the project was very well discussed, it's very well defined from a cost perspective and a scheduling perspective, and it will be completed on or about October 15th. So, Patricia Weiss, followed by Greg Sesser, please.
Good afternoon. We are troubled. What are the truths and the trusts that we are looking for in this grand scheme of receiving protected and precious water from our underground aquifers? Emotions, feelings of displeasure generated by fear, unknown and unreasonable. Why? We have water. It is here, but we can't see it. The need can be met. Water has been offered and not accepted. We are told by our small elected cluster of CCSD directors that the solution comes as an emergency water supply project. Is this the answer? I say no, as others of Cambria community say no regarding a costly structure and an operation that may not meet required regulations or the possibility of saltwater intrusion. The consistent monitoring and the maintenance requires additional monies. Having read 5 lengthy reports from agency must interface with CCSD to allow permits for the grand scale project to be considered, I find all of them negative in their reviews. These are some of the comments and concerns regarding the documents and the project. Various permits that CCSD has not posted because of changes and modifications of the conceptual project. Detailed consistencies in the event of pond failures are lacking. Evaluations of water balance to understand water quality impact have not been considered. The development of an adequate timeline for this project is in question. The need to submit an application to the Fish, Game, Wildlife Service along with a habitat conservation plan is lacking. There should be an analysis of the likely effects of the project on the tidewater goby and the California red-legged frog, and that is in question. Potential unreasonable noise levels which would impact nearby state park campgrounds, the airborne spray mist from evaporation fans adjacent to campground and nearby residences spraying almost 100 tons of brine per day. The California Coastal Commission, in the early beginnings of this project, wanted to implement a short-term and immediate solution rather than a long-term major infrastructure, which is raising concerns. Inadequate protection of nearby coastal resources and potential nonconformity to LCP and Coastal Act. And the last issue is a project that is likely to adversely affect the steelhead salmon. My last remark comes directly from me, and that is the monies that are going to be spent for this project. We live in a small community. Our overall residential numbers are small. We have a accumulation of wealthy, middle class, and those who are on very fixed, tight budgets. I ask the question, how are we going to handle these monies that are needed to cost for this special project? Thank you.
Thank you. Greg Sesser is followed by Elizabeth Bettenhausen.
Greg Sesser, Cambria resident and businessman. I titled this The Definition of Transparency. The CCS rate increase to fund the Cambria Emergency Water Supply Project can only be described as a classic bait and switch. The original cost was approximately $40,000 per month for a portable desal system. At that time, most people, including me, were in favor of this short-term remedy. In the following weeks, the project transformed into a permanent structure and costs skyrocketed to a now $13 million, including the financing. That figure is based on not the 20% overage that could be 10.5 mil, which, as a total, could reach 15 million. The CCSD has made a mockery of the Prop 218 as the project cost and definition became a moving target. This planned confusion led to a late but respectable rally of 800 protest letters. That number would have been substantially higher if the scope and purpose of their now permanent plant had been disclosed at the start. The no-bid contract given to CDM Smith is unheard of in the public sector projects of this magnitude. While we burned through 25 acre-feet of water conducting the tracer test, the Pine Dorado is being held hostage. It has all become apparent to me that when a prominent water project supporter said, "Well, Greg, don't you want to build more houses?" Now that's transparency at last.
So Elizabeth Bettenhausen is followed by Jeff Hellman.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I had assumed that we would hear the current update on this document before we spoke, so I hope that you might entertain the possibility of letting us speak again after we hear the update, which we have not heard. My first comment is that in your resolution, it says that you will authorize the installment sale financing, et cetera, and approving related documents. You never tell us what those related documents are. And I hope that you have it clear, dear board, in your minds, what you're approving in related documents when you take a vote on this resolution. Number two, I would like you to clarify the three components of the water fund in the agreement, the order of use of them, and how the amount of transfers will be determined. Now that's a little vague. Let me be a little clearer. The CCSD's rate consultants, it's reported in the page 51 of your report for today, Bartles Wells, projects the capital surcharge to generate $782,000 per annum per year. The installment sale financing agreement before you today projects that we would pay $658,276 per year on average. My question, if we have less than $658,000 per year, where will the remainder of the payment monies come from? Now, it's clear that you have three sources for your payments. You have items 1 and 2 in the plan you just adopted under the Prop 218. But you also have net revenues from water, utterly unclarified with regard to conservation, and you have what's called the use of property taxes. As far as I can tell, if you do not have enough serping of water by this community to pay off the $600,000+ a year, you will start using property tax money to pay for the rest. And that means you will start cutting back on fire, on pros, on administration, because we only get a certain number of dollars there, friends, and you spend them. My concern is that if we are responsible for paying the loan and we don't have enough money, we have to use other monies that we have contributed for other purposes in order to pay off a system that might not work at all. I want you to point out, with my 13 seconds left, you have in your agreement today a litigation item. As far as I know, there's no litigation before the CCSD right now. I'm ignorant if there is. But I quote now, there is inquiry and investigation by state government authorities that will affect the district and its properties and operations, and they are now underway concerning this project. And they might well have a material and adverse effect on the district regarding this project. You know that they are there because they were all presented to you at the last meeting. They are not litigation, they are government investigations of what you're doing. And you cannot say, if the truth falls upon you, that you have the best of the undersigned knowledge that there is no such thing. If you know what you got last time, you can't lie today and say you don't know about it. I have another question. I'll just pose it. I won't elaborate. I'm sorry this takes so much time to make it clear. It took me hours to understand 4 pages. Why are you giving so much unlimited authority to the general manager in carrying out the agreement you are going to sign today, including revision of it? And I can quote you section 3 of your document.
Thank you. Jeff Hellman is followed by Marge Sesser. Margie.
Jeff Hellman, I'm a member of this community. We could have spent $1.5 million and got a temporary desal plant going, and then you would have had your 3 years to, design a plant, get it through the rate agencies, to do everything correctly. Instead, you're selling our infrastructure to a hedge fund company or some sleazy bank out of state because the local banks wouldn't give this district a loan. You guys are setting us up to be taken over by, as a private water company. You guys are setting us up to have water bills that are going to be $300 to $400 a month. This is what some people in Cayucas pay. You guys are just completely screwing the members of Cambria. Let me read you what happens if you're more than 3 days late with your payment on all of this. This is section 6.2C. The lender may enter the property where the equipment comprising the project is located and retake possession of the project or require district at its expense to promptly return any and all of the project to the possession of the lender at such place within the United States as lessor shall specify to permit the lender to sell or lease the project. This is what you people are doing to us. You're on the path of privatization. You're on the path of, turning us upside down, shaking us, so all of our money can go into a hedge fund or some, money changers' pockets. We don't need that. If you guys knew what you were doing, if you had any semblance of reasonability, you would have planned a project like it's supposed to be. A 3-year project takes 3 years. You could have spent $1.5 million and got us through the difficult times to get us into a project that would pass muster with the state agencies and do everything correctly. Instead, you're just bulldozing this on. Not only that, but in this meeting here, you guys have just blindsided the public. There's been no communication. There's been no talk. Nobody knows what you're doing. You're just going forth and just flipping off the whole public on this thing, and it's outrageous. I hope you people suffer the consequences of your own actions.
Thank you. Margie Sessers, followed by Tina Dickinson.
Margie Sesser, and I'm a Cambria resident. And I'm just really concerned because I think you're probably all good people, and I think you have an opportunity to stop and think before you vote for this and use your moral compass, because as you know, there are a lot of people here in town who are barely making ends meet. They have not just 1, 2, 3 jobs. They're the ones that are cleaning your toilets. They're the ones that are doing your gardening. They're the ones that are serving our tourists as they come in. And they are just barely paying their water bill now. If you vote for this, when there's other alternatives that are less expensive, then what you're doing is you're going to put these people in a position that they can't afford to live here. Now think about the ripple effect. If these people can't afford to live here, that are providing a service, then they have to move away. It's going to affect our school enrollment, because look who's in our schools right now. I'm not reproducing right now, and most of you are not either. We don't have young children anymore in the schools. And so they are going to have to leave with their children. And then that means we will have layoffs at the school districts because we won't have the enrollment that we currently have. But you also need to think about what it is for other people who can't afford this kind of bill. So before you vote, think carefully. Some of us don't have wills on our property. Some of us can't afford to pay for these kinds of bills. And I think you really, really need to think about that and see if you are representing all the people of Cambria and not just the elite few of people who feel entitled, who've said to me, well, Margie, some people just should know before they move here, this is an expensive place to live. That's really entitlement and telling people the attitude of, well, just let them eat cake because they can't afford bread. Just think about that, the kind of decision you're really making, because it's not just about those few, but it's about everybody you're representing and all the people who couldn't understand that they were supposed to put in the protest because it wasn't in their language. Thank you.
Tina Dickinson is followed by Rick Hawley.
Tina Dickinson, Cambria. I think what you're about, if you do decide to vote yea on the resolution, I will have, if I had any respect for any of you before, I will have zero respect for you, for what you are about to do to this community. It's outrageous that you would be selling off our infrastructure, using our infrastructure as a sale that we have to pay back on. And what infrastructure exactly are we talking about? I want to know. Let me just say to you that I have lived in Claremont, a city of 36,000 that has been covered. Their water is provided by Golden State. Claremont now has been for the last 3 to 4 years trying to get out of the contract with Golden State, a privatized water company. They've offered $54 million. Golden State No, not good enough. Ojai has just gotten out of the contract with Golden State. It took them a long time. Los Osos has an issue with Golden State. And if that's the path you're taking us down, which I believe it is, and when you say to a woman last month, on the 24th, last week, who came up to this podium, and she said, I want more transparency, I want more communication. And President Behringer, you assured her that we had transparency because the website has it, the AGP, the slow span. Really? So what I want to bring to your attention, board, this morning is an email that I received from Tom Luster from the Coastal Commission. I don't know if Mr. Gruber or Mr. Gresham have shared this with you, but this was addressed to Monique Madrid, carbon copied to a CC to Bob Gresham's, Mari Garza Bird, Redmond Randall, and Jerry Gruber. Possible interagency meeting on Cambria water supply project. Thanks very much, Monique. I'm out of the office until Tuesday, but we'll get back to you then. I think both days work for me, but would like to check with others. This is regarding an interagency meeting. And as we discussed, we recommend the district hold off on completing CEQA or funding the proposed project until after the meeting, as you are likely to get advice and guidance from the agencies about substantial changes needed for the project to avoid significant impacts and be consistent with several requirements and laws. For example, the current proposal is likely to result in permanent loss of one or more age classes of steelhead, so your expected operations would need to be severely curtailed. Have you, board, received that memo? Have you received it? Because if you haven't, there's a problem here, a very big problem. Thank you.
Thank you. Did you get it? I didn't get it this morning. Apparently one of the other directors did. I may not have checked it. Rick Hawley's followed by Barbara Crowley.
Boy, if that's not a bombshell, I don't know what is. I think you can adjourn the meeting and we can all go home. But to get to the matters of the laws, I'm wondering why you, as a board, who the community elected and respects, aren't getting good legal advice and good advice from our district manager about following the laws. You're about ready to botch the third major water project that the Community Service District has put forward. Think about that. And it's inevitable because you don't follow the law. If you would follow the law, work with the agencies, and stop being bullies and think you know more than they do, and think you know more than these good folks do, maybe you'll get someplace. Thank you.
And Barbara is followed by Janice Schmidt.
Barbara Crowley. In light of the comments you have received from the public agencies and general staff and general public, staff is recommending that you not approve the IS study today until everything has been worked out. But here today, you are asked to consent to Section 3.2 of the loan agreement, using any available general funds to pay for completion of the project if project funds are not sufficient. That's a heavy thing to agree to. Previously, you have stated that no other general funds would be used for the project. It seems premature to enter into an open-ended contract with a bank before you know your total amount needed. The additional design changes required by permitting agencies may well result in using general funds to complete the project. Can today the loan agreement be delayed until you have your final design and build project? Thank you.
Thank you. And the last is Janice Schmidt.
Good afternoon. What I would like to say is that if and when this project passes muster with the agencies, the Coastal Commission, Fish and Game, that, thank you, that I would like to ask that the prepayment penalty, if in fact we get a grant and there are monies that can go towards this project if it is funded, that those be renegotiated. I think 5% of $3,750,000, $187,000, you know you may get this grant. That's outrageous. You already have issuance costs of over $139K for this project. This has to be looked at line by line. That particular item on the grant just enrages me because you know you may get this money. 5% is way out of line, and this is a very creatively funded loan.
Thank you. Lynn Harkins it wants to speak on item 3A, and Ms. Hawley, if you want to speak on item 3A, I'll also put you after Lynn.
I didn't put any agenda item on that. I put public comment, which is what on the screen when I came in here.
I'm sorry, but the public comment can only be on items that are on the agenda, because this is a special meeting. So
You're
if you
very
wanna,
special, and I'm very special too, sir. So this is where I'm going to speak.
Okay, please do.
Because I'm not, this isn't public comment. These are corrections of error of fact. Okay? This is like editing. I do it as a public service.
Thank you.
Okay. First, you established ownership on this piece of property with a 1991 for this project, a 1991 record of survey, which did not change the property boundaries that were actually established in 1890. Anybody heard about this on the board? That the state parks is resurveying to establish what the boundary line is between your property and the state parks property. And the way it's looking, and I will email you the graphics if, oh, guess who isn't here today? Another special element here. It will take out your percolation ponds. In other words, which is a critical part of your existing plan, such as it is. I raised this issue with state parks last September, so I had no idea that this was in the works. So my motives were entirely about the stewardship of the state parks. I raised it with you in April because of the reoccurrence of an algae-covered bog down there right next to what to me is a sacred creek, San Simeon Creek, and it has so many levels of protection that it's hard to see how that could be there. Well, it doesn't belong there. If you can visualize an oval, 2/3 of the way up the oval is where this property line is going to end up being, taking out the percolation ponds, which means you have to totally redesign this project because you're planning on dumping your microfiltration effluent in those percolation ponds. Matter of law, the North Coast Area Plan, Chapter 7, page or something, any desalination plant has to be public, has to be owned by the public. You cannot sell this airy-fairy plan to a hedge fund or anybody else. It must be, it says it twice, any desalinization, not seawater, any desalinization plant that is built in Cambria to serve the area of Cambria must be owned and operated by CSD. That's what happens when you fire people or run them off who have institutional memory. The North Coast Area Plan is 2008, which, by the way, just for old time's sake, I have a discussion from your March 2008, 27th, 2008, where there's talk of conservation, water recycling, and desalination to assist us in our water dilemma here. You have This board and every other one, the clones, nobody has done anything substantive about recycling our water, which means you're polluting the state park property that you're encroaching on with secondary effluent. Google secondary effluent contents on the EPA. Comes up with a huge list of things that make it through secondary effluent, including but not restricted to horrible things like triclosan, which are in all the antibacterial things. Horrible things like nonylphenol, which are breakdown products, which are sequestered in sediments, which is where the tidewater goby builds its burrow for egg laying and for bringing forward the next. These are endocrine disruptors. You know, go ahead and unit. And I think that having the why wouldn't they go for this? They are going to prey on you for your not having your ducks in a row, because no problem to them. They've got a lock on our property tax. That's their backup, which to me puts you in a whole different ballpark for a 218 protest. We are talking assessment here, which means you have to give everyone a ballot, and there has to be a yes or no vote cast. May I point out from the recent Prop 218, you got 800 no votes and only 15 yes. So for all of your supposed community support for what you're doing, what you're trying to plow through here, you don't, you could only get 15 people to take the time to put in a yes vote? Okay.
Cynthia Hawley, followed by Valerie McNeil, please.
I will email you supporting documents for all this. My letter from State Park saying there will be the State Park says there will be no wastewater settling ponds on State Park property.
And
start digging up there on the north side of the trees.
Good afternoon. I'm Cynthia Hawley, and I'm here to talk about a little bit different kind of law with you. Although Lynn is right, you don't have the authority to approve a project that is not publicly owned. You have the authority only to act within the law, and this one's not within the law. And if you don't have the authority to take an action, that means that your action doesn't exist, and it's void as a matter of law. But the real thing I want to talk with you about is that you told us, as if it were true, that this project was for an emergency water supply. And you keep telling us that, as if it were true. And what you've done is you've tricked us. You've tricked the public into believing that this is an emergency water supply, both temporary and impermanent and immediate. Temporary and immediate is neither of those things. Statutorily, it's not an emergency project. And what this means is that you said something that was a lie to get us to vote for this thing and not protest. A lot of people didn't protest because they thought it was an emergency project. What we call this in the law is a fraud. We call it fraud. And so I'm not talking about the kind of laws that won't reach you as individuals, because this will reach you as individuals. Now, you have to kind of, that also can go under the umbrella of official misconduct and breach of fiduciary duty, each of you, not as a board. And I'm pretty sure that, that you didn't bring this contract to the board beforehand, that we didn't in public look at a bunch of different options and you talked them over and then you decided on this. I think this is the first time we've seen it. And what that means is that you've got a Brown Act violation. And it's, you decided somewhere else and you're going to come here to memorialize it. That's a Brown Act violation. Now, the Brown Act has a pretty important law. That means if you put these two things together, taking action at an illegal meeting, which is what you did, and keeping information from the public that this money is not for an emergency project, but for a permanent desal project, you've committed a crime under the Brown Act. It is a misdemeanor and it is punishable by imprisonment. So you may want to think about that.
Barry McNeil is followed by Ken Butterfield.
Barry McNeil, Cambria. I'd like to focus on a very narrow part of today's discussion, and that is Western Alliance Bank. If you follow through with this, you'll not only be exposing Cambria to manipulated LIBOR rates, but I think you should know who you're getting in bed with here. Western Alliance Bank is not the healthiest bank in the world. They have a Tier 1 leverage ratio of 9.25 and a Tier 1 risk-based capital ratio of 10.3, both of which are below where regulators would like them to be. They were a recipient of TARP funds, and in fact, when the TARP funds were plotted, the Western Alliance had twice as much exposure to bad loans as the average bank between 2007 and 2011. And if you recall, at that time, banks had a lot of bad loans. So to say that they had twice as much is pretty damning. And they still have almost $1 billion in troubled assets remaining. So here we are looking at making ourselves beholden to this bank. These are risk takers. They have pumped up their ratios considerably in the past year by acquisition. And they've been acquiring banks in Nevada, which is not the best place to be acquiring banks with a lot of loans on their books. I think that this is a risk-taking bank, and that's not what you want in a banker. So I think that when they stumble, we will be on the hook, because as we remember now, bailouts are out and bail-ins are in, which means that everyone who does business with them is exposed. So I would urge you not to expose Cambrians to that risk. Thank you.
Thank you. And Ken Butterfield.
My name is Ken Butterfield. I think many of the speakers here have covered some of these issues very, very well, much better than I can. So I'm going to abbreviate this document I was going to read. What you're doing here amounts to a hostile takeover of our services district. You've cooked up this scheme behind the scenes with no consideration for less risky funding sources. You've cooked up this scheme knowing there are viable alternatives that are far less expensive, far fewer engineering demands, have far fewer permitting hurdles, and are far faster to put in place. You're perpetrating a lie by characterizing your desal project as a solution to an emergency. Your plant isn't to ensure the immediate health and safety of Cambrians. It's for providing water for development, pure and simple, at the expense of working middle-class families and folks on fixed incomes. There are 360 individuals and 40 families in Cambria living in poverty. Over 70% of the families with children in our schools are classified as socioeconomically disadvantaged. Virtually none of the people working in businesses on Main Street are paid a living wage. The average working person in Cambria makes less than $35,000 a year, and average Americans have lost a third of their wealth in recent years. And the middle class is still in decline. Think about this. Every time you look at somebody you know on Main Street who's a working class person, these people will be looking back at you. Your obsession with growth at any cost has rendered you void of compassion, and this is predatory capitalism at its worst. Of course, driving out the middle class will be good for some of you, and I think it's going to be a very interesting election cycle coming up.
Thank you. General Manager, would you introduce the item?
President Berenger and board members. Item 3A is to consider the adoption of Resolution 33-2014 authorizing the installment sale, financing, and emergency water supply project in the aggregate principal of not to exceed $9 million and approving related documents. I'm going to turn it over to the finance director at this point in time and have her introduce the folks that are here to discuss the terms of this contract. We have a brief PowerPoint presentation after that, and then we can bring it back to the board for any questions at that time. So.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President and Mr. Gruber. The term of the proposed debt is 20 years with an estimated fixed rate. It's on? Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Okay. The term of the debt is proposed to be 20 years with an estimated fixed rate, originally projected to be 4.09 based upon the LIBOR rates that we had at the time that the staff report was prepared. Today's rates will drive that to 4.11. The principal amount of the debt is estimated to be 8.939, and the cost of issuance is $139,000. The estimated total interest rate based upon today's LIBOR rate would be $4,249,508.21, and the total debt service would be $13,188,508.21. If the debt is never refinanced, the last debt service payment would be due on August 1st of 2034.
The LIBOR rate is 5.11 today, by the way.
Our financial advisor is here, and we have current LIBOR rates. We can discuss that.
Investigation because they're fraudulent. You have banks in trouble, part of the LIBOR scheme.
Would you like to introduce the?
Let me finish my staff report. I'll try to be very brief, and then I'll introduce the financial advisor and the bond counsel who have come down to address you today and give you the PowerPoint. Just going down to page 4, we typically finance major capital improvement projects when sufficient cash is not available. The agency does not have sufficient cash to fund the project as it is currently designed and projected to cost. Providing financing for a 2014 emergency water supply project installment sale agreement has been a joint effort by NHA Advisors and Southwest Securities. NHA Advisors serves as the municipal advisor under Dodd-Frank federal securities law and solely represents the district in structuring this transaction. Southwest Securities serves as the placement agent under Dodd-Frank and has primary responsibility for contacting potential bank lenders. And also here is Charles Adams with Jones Hall, who is bond counsel or special counsel for debt and has served as special counsel for debt or bond counsel to the district in all your previous deals that you have had in the recent past, the last 10 years. On page 9, you'll find 10-year swap rate information. I gave you a history of information so that you could see what the trends were. 7/29 or July 29th, it went to 2.60. 7/30, it went to 2.66. 7/31 to 2.70. The bank has asked the district to pledge 3 sources of revenue as security for the loan. Those 3 sources are your net revenues after operating expenses in the district's water utility fund, also emergency water supply capital surcharges, and also ad valorem property taxes. Ad valorem property taxes have been pledged in the last several debt deals that the district has issued, so this does not represent a deviation from past practice, and in fact, it's I'm going to characterize it as being in here because any prospective lender saw the past deals and saw the district's practice of pledging property taxes and insisted upon it for this deal also. And I'll let Mark speak to that when he has a chance to take the podium. Had that not been the past practice of the agency, we might have been able to avoid that request. There are call provisions that have been written into the deal. We have attempted to accommodate up to $3.75 million in grant funds, should they be received, and we will be able to pay those funds back to the lender at a rate of a 5% penalty. The entire loan may be prepaid after 10 years with no penalty, and in that interim period of time, the entire loan may be prepaid with penalties equal to the cost to Western Alliance to unwind the interest rate swaps that they've executed to hedge their 20-year fixed interest rate commitment. I think that that's going to conclude my comments from the staff report. You've all had a chance to read it. Yes.
One quick question. When you said 5%, is it 5% of the total loan amount or 5% of the amount?
5% of the amount that we, so if we received a $1 million grant, not a $3.7 million grant, and we're able to refund $1 million back to the bank, we'd have to pay a 5% penalty on that $1 million.
On the $1 million, not on the
entire amount.
Okay, that's fine.
And Mr. Northcross can confirm his understanding of the negotiation which took place, and your bond counsel can also speak to that when they take the TIAs. So I think that that's going to conclude my comments out of the staff report. It may come back to me, but I want to invite Mr. Northcross, who has been retained as your financial counsel in this matter, to give a brief PowerPoint that speaks specifically to the debt and the conversations with the bank.
Thank you, Tracy. And thank you, Board. Appreciate this opportunity. We understand this is a huge issue for this community, and hopefully I can provide some more clarity on the financing side of the issues. So, your able technician in the back gave me this device, and if I press the right buttons and point in the right direction, it works. Table of contents. What am I going to talk about? Number one, financing needs. What are we trying to accomplish here with the financing? Financing challenges, yes, and there are some challenges. The actual financing, what are we recommending for the board to act on? Commitments from the board. We'll go in details on what exactly this board is committing this district to do for the next 20 years. Finally, recommendations. Financing needs. What do we need here? Well, $8.8 million to fund fully the emergency water supply project and to reimburse the general fund for cash spent on pre-development costs. The funding must be available the first week of August. That is our understanding because you want to execute a contract, I understand, with CDM Smith on a design build. The funding is required, again, before the district executes this agreement with the contractor. You want the longest financing term possible to minimize the impact on water rates. In other words, the longer the term, the lower the annual debt service. The debt service must be less than or equal to the recently adopted EWS capital surcharge. The projection from Bartle Wells, as noted by one of the speakers, is $780,000. So we had to be equal to or below that, and we are below that. Provide for an early call of bond of debt in the event the district receives grant funding for a portion of the emergency water supply project costs. Normally, municipal debt obligations are call protected for a number of years. We need to negotiate an exception to that with whomever our lender is going to be, because if that grant comes in, we want you to be able to pay off a portion of this debt and thereby lower your emergency water supply surcharge rates pro rata to how much you pay off. Let's move on to the next slide. If I press the right button here. Financing challenges. Part one. Big picture, the financing challenges have to do with the finances primarily of the district. and the fact that the risk here is that you run out of water. The simple concept here that everybody in the muni bond world got right away is that just like all other water utilities in the state, most of your charges are what we call variable or volumetric, and a minority are what you call fixed per meter. And there's many good policy reasons for doing it that way. The issue that, to my knowledge, and I've been doing water financing since '83, no one has ever confronted before, so another reason to be glad you're the first, is what happens if someone actually runs out of water and the variable or volumetric rate component goes to zero. That is a situation on the financing side, to my knowledge, I've never had to deal with, and to my knowledge, no one else has had to deal with. It reduces water revenues in this district by about 65%. With the help of staff, we calculated in the wastewater side to be about 85%. Even though most of your revenue is collected on a volumetric basis, most of your expenses are fixed, and that's standard for water and wastewater utilities around the state. They're all in that same boat. Bottom line is, if you are actually confronting a situation where a utility might run out of water, the fundamental problem is most of your revenue goes away because it's volumetric, but most of your expenses stay because they're fixed. So there's an imbalance there, and that is a major credit concern. So let me press the right button again. I get it. Okay, good. So neither, in this worst case scenario, neither the water nor the wastewater utility have got enough money to operate, bottom line, okay? However, the district is not in covenant default in any of your loan agreements. You've got three: 2006 loan agreement, 2010, and the state revolving fund. You got a loan from the state of California, basically. Because you have a pledge of ad valorem property taxes to both the water and the wastewater utility debt. Okay, that's good from a credit perspective. However, the third bullet, the district uses ad valorem property taxes, as you guys know and your staff knows, and one of the speakers noted, to fund a variety of other important projects. This is where the names Detroit and Stockton come into this meeting in Cambria. And the reason why is that in the Detroit and Stockton bankruptcy courts, the bankruptcy courts have made a decision that lenders don't get paid 100 cents in the dollar when they've got a lien on property taxes. There's a whole bunch of mouths at that table, and the money gets spread around. As a result, in dealing with lenders, or if you were rated by S&P, Standard & Poor's, or Moody's Credit Rating Services, the Detroit and Stockton bankruptcies have changed the perception of the value of an ad valorem property tax pledge. It's still worth something, but no one in the municipal bond or municipal debt world believes that you'll get 100 cents in the dollar if that's your only security. Again, this is not the fault of anybody in this room. It's, you know, things that have gone on places many miles from here, but it is what it is. So the financing challenge, part 3. The third piece is, why are we recommending a private placement as opposed to a public offering? For the benefit of everyone here, a public offering means you offer bonds to the general public, just like you could go on to Charles Schwab or Fidelity or Franklin, and there you'd find Cambria Community Services District with a $8.9 million water revenue bond. That's not what we're doing. A couple of reasons. One is securities laws have really changed, and they've gotten very drastic, actually since July 1. The other reason, very important, is that banks, certain community and regional banks, have gotten very aggressive in bidding on municipal debt. And to the point where, for our own firm, I would say over half the debt offerings we do are now private placements with banks because, frankly, they're cheaper, it's lower cost of money than going out to a regular municipal bond offering. That is the case here as well. However, I do want to, this is my own editorial, I'm learning all my clients to this. The Securities Exchange Commission, effective July 1, has announced that it's going after municipalities. okay, that used to be you were not on the radar screen, you are now on the radar screen. Good news is you do not have any publicly offered debt. Both your 2006 and your 2010 debts were private placements with banks, and your third loans with the state of California. Those are not public offerings. However, what this means, and we encounter this more when we're doing, I'll call it traditional, I'll call it relatively risky California bonds, Melrose, land secured debt. The disclosure of these risks to potential investors has always needed to be very clear. Well, now we've been taken to a new level. And the bottom line is that the SEC has essentially said it will investigate even small public agencies, even if they are current on their debt. They pay all their bills. They will still investigate you if they don't like what you're doing with publicly offered debt. So it's another reason to do a private placement, but bottom line here, it is your cheapest source of money. And I apologize for taking the time to give an editorial, but I want to get that word out there that we are in a different world on this. So let's move on to the next slide. Our response to the financing challenges. Number one, let me complete the presentation, sir, then I really want to answer everyone's questions. Fund the EWS project through a private placement with the bank. Private placements not only are cheaper, but they can be accomplished much quicker, 30 to 45 days, as opposed to a public offering, 90 to 120 days. In reality, given the need to award a contract this week, a public offering was not even an option. Again, as I just mentioned, private placements are not under the legal jurisdiction of the Securities Exchange Commission. It's you and your bank lender. That is your deal. The other piece, as Tracy has mentioned and some of the speakers have noted, pledge the following revenues as security. I'll jump ahead and answer one of the speakers' questions. Number one is the emergency water supply capital surcharge. That's number one, first place you go. And again, I'll jump ahead. Debt service is about $660,000 a year. The emergency water supply surcharge projected by Barter Wells is $780. We look pretty good on that. Number two, if that money, God forbid, is not sufficient, net revenues of the water fund. That is a very well-defined term. It's defined in your 2006 loan document. It's defined for the wastewater fund using the same terms in your 2010. What that means is net revenues after all operating expenses, okay? So the difference in operating expenses, if you have a major repair, say, God forbid, a major transmission line breaks, like the one on Sunset Boulevard above UCLA did last week, that would be not considered, that repair would not be an operating expense. That would be a capital expense. That would be subordinated to debt service. Your regular line maintenance work, meter reading, all of that, billing, is senior to debt service. That gets paid first. So I hope I can go into more detail on that, but that's a general outline of how that works. Finally, the ad valorem property taxes. As Tracy mentioned, pledged in 2006 and 2010 as well. So, mitigating the bankruptcy risk. The B word is ambient in the room. I hate to use it. It can be seen as a scare tactic. It's not intended here because if you do run out of water, again, God forbid, you don't have enough water and sewer revenues to even operate the water and wastewater utilities, and there's a possibility that bankruptcy is a possibility. And when you deal with lenders, bond investors, public offering, private placement, that's the first question they go to. When they add everything up together, that is the first place they go. And so I've had to deal with this over the last month. So bringing you into the dialogue. So I apologize, but that is how it works. The emergency water supply rate capital charges are pledged in whole to the lender. There's no offset for net revenues, operating expenses. They're just pledged in whole. 35% of them are fixed, the rest are variable, which means that the scenario where the $780,000 is not enough is if the project doesn't get completed, then you're only getting 35% of that, which is, I'll make up a number, $250,000, $300,000 a year, not enough to cover debt service. We already established if the project doesn't get completed on time, that there are no net revenues in water or wastewater. You don't have enough money coming in to even cover your operating expenses. Debt service is subordinate to operating expenses, so into discussion. So it's the ad valorem property taxes are the real backstop here. And I have to tell you that everyone we talked to looked at that as being a really key factor, notwithstanding Detroit and Stockton throwing a bit of a shadow over that. Finally, the last piece, and again, speakers have commented on this. I want to make it really clear. And we got Chick here as well. We'll spend some more time on some of the legal issues that the people in the community have raised. The security interest of the bank is solely in the equipment, and we'll call it the equipment that's being brought in for this, as opposed to the actual real estate, the project site. They don't want the project site. Their security interests, again, what they need to go back and deal with their own credit committees on, the bankruptcy risk, is to say, look, if everything goes bad, the worst case is we'll come in with a semi-truck and we'll load up the equipment onto the semi-truck and take it out. So they have a security interest in the equipment, but not in the real estate. Let's talk about the financing. The financing process. The financing process was a bid process. We normally go out to more banks. We only went out to 7 banks in this case. The reason why we didn't go out to more, because we categorically eliminated a bunch of them because there was no way they could respond in a timely fashion. I'll give you one example. Wells Fargo has done a very risky transaction in the city of Davis a year ago, and that was the good news. The bad news is it was 6 months, and they got there. They got there, but we don't have 6 months. We've had to start in January with Wells to get that one done. I'm just giving that as an example. There are a number of other banks that are, I'll call them household names, great banks. They do not have the ability to respond in a timely fashion. So who are the 7 we went to? As I mentioned, in the last 2 years, a number of banks have become very aggressive in public finance and muni debt. And we went to those banks that we know can close very rapidly, that can deliver rapid performance. And you see 6 of them on there, and one of them, Rabobank, has a local branch, but that's not why we really went to them. We also added Heritage Oaks Bank, which is your local banker, to the list as well. These banks all have strong interest in public finance, with the exception of, say, Heritage Oaks Bank, and they can close quickly. Let's move to the next page. What was the response? We got interest from 3 of the banks. BBVA Compass was very interested. However, they would only go out 15 years. One of the things I think everyone in the room needs to know is that banks don't normally provide fixed interest rate commitments for long periods of time without going through an internal hedging process. And BBVA will not go beyond 15 years. Capital One and Western Alliance Bank were both willing to go out 20 years on a fixed rate. One thing I want to make really clear, the interest rate quoted at 4.09% is fixed through the final maturity of 2034. I will address all the stuff that Tracy put in about swap rates in a second, but just hold on that thought. You have a fixed rate commitment. This district is not being asked to take any interest rate or market risk once you close this transaction through the final maturity in 2034. As I mentioned in one of the sub-bullets here, if we went to a 15-year amortization instead of 20-year, annual debt service goes up by 20%. That has a rate impact. You know, basically it puts our EWS surcharges right there then. So we elected to start negotiations with just Capital One and Western Alliance. So let's go to the next slide and see what we got. Here we got the comparison. So what did we get back? Capital One gave us 20 years. Western Alliance, both, they gave us 20 years. 4.75% interest from Capital One, 4% interest from Western Alliance. Debt service reserve fund, a little jargon here from the muni bond industry, but what a debt service reserve fund means is that whether you're doing a public offering to regular people through Charles Schwab or something, or you're doing a private placement with a bank, sometimes, in fact, most of the time, lenders want to see the issuer, either through the debt or through their own cash reserves, put up an escrowed, legally sequestered reserve equal to 1 year's debt service on the bonds. Capital One wanted that, and they wanted it from the district's own cash. That would have meant about $700,000 coming out of the district's cash to be held in escrow by a third-party bank. Heritage Oaks Bank probably would have been the bank. Western Alliance is not requiring that. No reserve fund. That's good news. Rate covenant. Rate covenant is, again, one of the commitments the board makes. You've got rate covenants in your 06 and your 10 loan documents. The rate covenant says, we shall raise water and sewer rates as required to provide 110% coverage of our debt service obligations. The good news is you get to count your ad valorem property taxes in that calculation, okay? In the last year, as Tracy has noted, the net revenues from both water and wastewater have not been sufficient to cover all of your debt service. I mean, you've got cash reserves to cover it, but on a going forward basis, they have not been there. You are not in default on your loan covenants from 06 or 2010 or with the state because of the ad valorem. That was pledged, and that gives you huge coverage legally, so you're fine in that respect. Both Capital One and Western Alliance want a security interest in the equipment. They both want the same thing. Special call features. Because the Western Alliance bid was looking so much better because of the lower interest rate and no reserve fund, we did not go take Capital One down that road where we started negotiating the call features. We do have special call features, as one of the speakers, maybe two of them noted, and we'll go through that in detail with the Western Alliance bid. Debt service, Western Alliance, the interest rate would save you a lot of money. Again, the estimated annual EWS surcharge is shown there for comparison purposes. Okay. Now, one thing to keep in mind is the reason why all that swap stuff was in Tracy's staff report is that Western Alliance does not give a rate lock until just before closing. So we did have a window of market risk from the time we got their term sheet until actually today. We got their rate lock today. It's 4.11%. So should this board choose to authorize us to go ahead and close this transaction, your interest rate will be 4.11% from the day we close through August 1, 2034. No ifs, ands, or buts, no changes, into discussion. That's your lock. Next button, special call features. A little introduction. I think one of the speakers noted 5% is a major call penalty, and she's right. However, there's something important to understand about the municipal bond industry. If you'd gone with publicly offered bonds, you've been prohibited from calling the bonds for 10 years and then at a call premium of 2 or 3%. That's standard in the municipal bond industry. What we were asking for here was something that's special, which is we want the right to call a lot of this debt and prepay it within 1 year of issuance, literally starting the day after, should you choose to go ahead and authorize this, the day we close. So we were asking Western Alliance Bank to deviate from standard practice of municipal bond investors and say, no, we will allow you to call up to $3.75 million and pay it off years early than a standard. And they came back to us and said, yes, we will do that for you. Obviously, it improves their position because even though you will lower your emergency water supply charge if you do that, you still have the ability to raise it again if you need to because it doesn't come in at the levels you need it. So they said, fine, we will do that, but we, again, go back to all that swap stuff that was in Tracy's staff report. Our internal mechanism for giving you this fixed commitment for 20 years of 4.11% as it is today is we have to go out and do a bunch of fancy interest rate swap stuff, and it costs us money to unwind all that if you call the bonds early. because we're doing 20-year swaps and derivatives and all that's not our problem. They said, we just want to be made whole. If you call within the first year, our cost is about 5%. We'll put a 5% penalty on it. Based on my 30-plus years of experience, I would say that's pretty much the norm for negotiating a really early call like that. So yes, 5% is a lot of money. I think someone calculated it was a shade under $200,000, but it's good news. If this grant comes in, then you can use this to prepay this debt with 1 year, and then you can lower the rates. In addition, as I note, there are 4 call features here. The normal one is you can pay off all the debt in 10 years at par, no penalty. Okay, that's normal. You can also pay off the debt at any time by escrowing federal securities against all principal and interest payments through the first call date on August 1, 2024. Right now, that's really expensive. You're basically trying to pay 4% debt out of federal securities that are earning, 2% or something. However, that could change. Short-term federal rates could go back up, and that may suddenly look like it's a good option. You don't know. We don't know. In addition, the bank provided that you may prepay the debt at any time if you prepay whatever their cost to unwind all their swap transactions that they use to hedge this are. That's a great big black box. We put it in there to give you that option. I will not say that I understand the swap market. I'm not sure there's anybody on this planet who really can say they understand the swap market. But you do have that option in theory. Who knows? The real options you have that really matter are the grant at the 5% penalty. You can pay it off, and you can pay off this full debt in par in 10 years. And that's a very normal call feature for any public agency in this country. I got to press the right button again. Okay, another good question, the 4% interest rate. I apologize for rounding. Unrated California municipal bonds out 20 years are generally in the 4 to 5% range right now. This is an unrated transaction. Because of the water supply, the risk, I am not sure if you went to Standard & Poor's or Moody's, you could get an investment grade rating right now. I am very confident that after completion of the project, you would get a very good rating. But with that risk hanging over you, I really don't know. To go to the other extreme, what does the state of California with their AA3 very good bond rating pay for a 20-year debt? About 3.25%. So where does 4% range? It's kind of in between. I have to say 20-year private placements with banks for water utilities are generally around 4%. I would say if you did not have the water supply running out of water risk, you might be allowing 375, you'd be a little lower. So there is a cost for that. I think where I thought the cost would come in is where Capital One came in at 475. Western Alliance came in a lot lower. I will give an editorial. My reaction when I saw that number was that don't let them out of the room before they sign. I was relieved, very relieved. The average interest rate on a serialized publicly offered water revenue bond with a credit rating of BBB would be between 3.5 and 3.75. If that were an option, it's not an option because of the timing. I don't think you'd do any better on a private placement. Plus, let's say that option is really only there if the project were complete. And I think at that point in time, I think it'd be a wash between a public offering and a private placement. Bottom line, we believe the 4% rate from Western Alliance Bank is fair and on the market. Cost of issuance. This is what your financing team is being paid. All of these fees are on a contingent basis. This means that if the board decides not to do the financing for whatever reason, we don't get paid a dime, okay? That's very important to understand. None of your team gets paid anything unless the transaction closes. I will say for the record that if we were all being paid on a non-contingent hourly basis, these fees would be lower. All these fees, I would say, are normal for a transaction of this size that's being funded on a contingent basis. This is kind of where the muni bond industry is when you're working on a transaction that has got a lot of challenges and you're working on a contingent basis. But we're not working on a non-contingent basis. We're not charging you hourly, so that's the way it is. Commitments from the board, very, very important slide. The board is committing to complete the project by January 1, 2015. You are committing to pledge all emergency water supply capital surcharge revenue to repaying the loan from Western Alliance Bank. In the third bullet, we actually have it right there. It's wrong in my handout here, but you're only going to issue new water fund debt if you can show 110% debt coverage from the combined net revenues of the water fund and ad valorem property taxes after an allocation of the property taxes theoretically available has been done between the water fund and the wastewater fund. This is the same deal essentially you have in your 2006 and your 2010 documents. No changes there. As I mentioned before, you have a rate covenant at 110%. It does factor in the ad valorem. And so the board does have that cushion of the ad valorem to avoid having to raise, if you want to, raising water and wastewater rates. And one of the speakers, or more than one, has raised a question that this fifth bullet, which I'm really glad I put it in, continue to operate the water utility in a manner consistent with federal tax law. I didn't know this was going to be important today, but let's deal with this one. What that really means is that this debt, the interest on it, is exempt from federal income tax. Anybody who owns it, Western Alliance Bank or whomever, does not need to pay any income tax on the interest payments received from Cambria Community Services District. How do you get this tax-exempt status? Well, it's very common to local governments throughout the United States, and the reason why, in order to keep that tax-exempt status, you have to continue to own and operate the facility with your own staff. It needs to be public employees. It needs to be a public facility done for public purposes, operated by public employees to be tax exempt. If you blow that, if you change that, the investors get mad, okay? Whether they're mom and pa buying it from Schwab or Western Alliance Bank, Western Alliance, normally they sue you and bad things happen. Western Alliance Bank actually is a little easier. They just want to gross up the interest rate from 4.11% to where the equivalent would be on a taxable basis. But that's only if you do something of your own accord to make this debt taxable, okay? As Chick can explain, we're going to have you covenant that you are not going to do that. That this is, in reality, if you want to do something, you're going to have to go pay off this debt in full before you're doing that. I know that's not the intention here, but I know people had questions. And so we don't want you to do that, and that's not how this deal works. So the other piece is that your 2006 water debt has got a mere $65,000 left on it. This is not absolutely crucial, but basically from I'll call it a legal perspective, you have the terms of the 2006 deal, $65,000 is a tail wagging an $8.9 million dog. Just pay that thing off. So we're starting over with clean set of legal documents and covenants on this particular water deal. Bank remedies upon default. Number one, file a lawsuit demanding that the district increase its water rates. You have covenanted to basically levy water rates at a level sufficient to cover the debt. And so the bank would come in and say, you aren't doing that, we're going into court, and we're going to demand that you do that. If for whatever reason you have not used your ad valorem property taxes to make up for the shortfall, they're going to go into court and they're going to say, we want to see your ad valorem property taxes. So again, that's where again, I hate to use the Detroit and Stockton words, but it's reality in this country right now. That's where that comes into play. Finally, the last remedy is to actually go in and repossess the equipment sitting out the project site. So, last slide, recommendations. press the right button. Western Alliance offer to finance this project meets all the criteria, delivering $8.8 million net for this project. Closing on Thursday, we're ready to do that. It's been quite an adventure, but we're ready to do that. Western Alliance is the best offer we received, and frankly, it is a good offer. It's better than I expected. And the 4.11% interest rate is on the market. So with that, I've concluded my presentation, and we should have Chick address a few things.
Just commenting on one thing before you step away, and that was as it related to the special call features.
Yes.
You and I had talked about the importance of putting the district in a position to be able to refinance this in years 1 through 9 or before year 10. But would you comment on how likely you think that is, that you would actually recommend that the district do something like that?
Right now, sort of like in an ideal world, and again, I don't want to get people in the room up in arms, but I'll tell the truth. In an ideal world, you would go out to finance this thing 6 months after it was in operation, and all risk had been removed. And you have found some basically good Samaritan to give you $8.8 million until you could actually have operating data and all that. Those aren't our facts. Those aren't our facts. That was not on the table as a way of doing it. And I had 2 banks actually tell me that. Well, can you come back a year from now? We'll finance it then, after it's been done and operating for a while. A non-starter for us. Western Alliance Bank or Capital One or BBVA, if we had taken any of those offers, they are taking risk on whether or not this project gets built on time and we don't run out of water. To do that, they want to earn a certain amount of money for a minimum amount of time. They don't need to earn it for 20 years, thank God, but they want to earn it for 10 years. And when you cut through all the stuff on call features, at the end of the day, what all those numbers and that text really means, if you're the bank, is that I want to get at least my 4% or 4.11% for at least 10 years, or the equivalent on a present value basis. That's what it really means. That's why the bank or any other bank is not going to back down on a situation where they take all the risk on bringing you out of the ground, this project, but they don't earn, their money for a while. That's the bottom line there.
Do you think that the district can live with this debt for the next 10 years?
Yes, 4%. Who knows, where the markets will go. If I predict the markets, I wouldn't be sitting here. I'd be retired someplace. But 4% 20-year money is really good money right now. That is a very good rate. And I say that with my heart. I really do believe that. And I was relieved when I saw that bid come in. Chick, I know there's a number of questions that the community has raised here that need to be answered. If you need this, I'll stand by with it.
Okay. Good afternoon, board members. My name is Charles Adams. I'm from the firm of Jones Hall. As Tracy mentioned, we have been your bond counsel, or the district's bond counsel, for in excess of 10 years. And we are generally following the financing template that you have employed on your prior financings, as has been mentioned a couple of times. There are a few things I would like to address. Mark's presentation was very comprehensive, and I don't have a lot to add to it. I'm here to answer questions. A couple of comments, though, that came out of the public comments that I would like to address. First of all, this resolution does approve the installment sale agreement that you have in front of you and that you've been provided previously. It contains all the material provisions that were described in the presentation and as well as the staff report. Having said that, these agreements are never final until we actually close. That's the nature of a bond issue. There's typos to be fixed. There's blanks to be filled in. I think this agreement that you have in front of you is remarkably final, but we do nevertheless, as one of the speakers pointed out, in the resolution, you authorize the general manager to approve any insubstantial changes. So that is a flexibility that we need in order to close the transaction. The other thing that was referred to was the reference to related documents in the title of the resolution. Those are, the only thing that the resolution authorizes, aside from the installment sale agreement itself, are closing documents. In order to close a municipal bond transaction, just like closing a home mortgage, there are a variety of certificates, representations, warranties, receipts, various minor, usually one-page documents. Federal tax law has a few forms that need to be filled out. Those are the documents that are authorized by this resolution. Nothing more. I did want to comment also on the pledge of the property taxes. That has been a feature on the district's previous financings, and there's actually a very good reason for that. Over the years, you don't hear it much now, but in the past, there have been rumblings from the state that special districts that receive a share of the property tax dollar could have it reallocated to other taxing agencies. Early on, this district, and for that matter, very many special districts around the state, elected to protect that income source with a pledge for debt. We think it constitutionally protects it against any effort from the state to take it. That's why it's in your prior documents. I suspect Tracy is correct. That's why it appears here as well. Those were the only comments that I wanted to add to what Mark had to say. We're certainly here to answer any questions you might have.
I have two people, Lynn Harkins and Mary Webb. Could you maybe present your comment as a question, or Mary Webb? Mary Webb followed by Lynn Harkins? You know, clarification or something like that?
You want me to make my comments in the form of a question?
Well, no, just a clarification.
I wanted to comment on item 3A, which
Please do.
I think this is. So there's a lot of fear-mongering and scare tactics that seem to be being thrown around, and I just heard another one that if we don't dedicate our ad valorem property taxes, they could be taken away. You know, I really do not appreciate scare tactics. I am not afraid of running out of water. We're not in a water emergency. If we were in a water emergency, we wouldn't be having all these events. We wouldn't be considering removing the porta potties. We wouldn't be handing out water out of SR1. We'd be talking to the ranchers and solving the water problem like we've done every year, every time we've had this problem in the last 20 years. So I'm not scared of that. I'm way more worried about you guys, because what you're doing, you didn't enact a stage 1 or stage 2 water shortage emergency. You never put in surcharges the last 3 years when we've been in this drought situation, which would have increased our enterprise funds. The reason we're low in our enterprise funds is because of one reason, one word: desalination. The sole focus of each one of you, of all these boards for the past 20 years, to the exclusion of every other water project. The only one that was acceptable had to have the word desalination in it. And because of that, we have spent millions of dollars out of our water enterprise funds and our wastewater enterprise funds on a failure, a 20-year failure that is being continued here today. We are in violation of our permits, our extraction permits on Santa Rosa Creek and San Simeon Creek. We're going under an environmental compliance audit right now. We've had sewage spills that have cost us hundreds of thousands of dollars because of aging infrastructure. So if you think the pipe that breaks in LA is any different than the pipes that are going to break here, let's get real. We know our infrastructure is breaking down. That means we won't be able to pay for that because we have to pay off this $800,000 loan every year. The loan does not include operation and maintenance of this plant, which is at least $400,000 a year, and that's not based on the new energy electrical rates that are going to be going up from PG&E the next 3 years, which are going to be like increases of 30%. So the operation and maintenance cost is way underestimated. It's going to be way more than $400,000 a year. The project doesn't even have a final price tag on it. We have no idea, because the project changes every time you look at another document from CDM Smith. It's being adjusted all the time. So I will repeat what the Coastal Commission just emailed your staff this morning. I'm sorry you didn't get that, all didn't get that email. We recommend the district hold off on completing CEQA or funding this proposed project until after you have an interagency meeting with all the agencies. This is a request for an interagency meeting. Hold off on all the funding until you've had this interagency meeting, because you are likely to get advice and guidance from the agencies about substantial changes needed for the project to avoid significant impacts and to be consistent with several requirements and the law. The current proposal, your project, is likely to result in permanent loss of one or more age classes of steelhead. As you know, my husband's come up and talked to you about steelhead almost every time he's here the last 6 years. So your expected operations will need to be severely curtailed. Vote no. Thank you.
Lynn Harkins, followed by Rick Hawley.
Well, if you didn't get today's message from Tom Lester, I wonder if you received the one on May 19th that he sent to your engineer and to your general manager, in which he said almost the same thing. We are concerned about your seeking financing and moving towards a permanent facility here. We suggest strongly that you keep your focus on what was originally, I'm paraphrasing, but I'll be happy to email you the document when I go home, because I can't take much more of this. They told you back in May, and yet you actually accelerated your rhetoric about this being a permanent project then. It was going to be a permanent for all future drought emergencies, but it puts us on a very tenuous footing for the existing drought emergency. I thank you for mentioning UCLA. 8 to 10 million gallons was said at first. I've heard since maybe 20 million gallons. You people have the tap turned on up at San Simeon Creek right now for 2 to 4 times that amount of water. 44 million gallons of water are being pumped out of that watershed to do a tracer test for this. There are no words to describe this project, because there is no project that has had any real substance and solid underpinning. And I reiterate that your wastewater ponds that you're counting on are off the table. Mr. Gresham says he doesn't know about that. He better find out. And I want to ask about the public. Well, first of all, that these facilities have to be public, so I don't see how anyone else can hold title to them for a millisecond, even if we start to buy it back. You are deeding over this mythical M.C. Escher imitation fountain to a private entity. I don't think that's permissible without a prop. Well, it's a violation of the North Coast Area Plan, but most remarkable is that the North Coast Area Plan requires that any desalination plant be energy efficient. And what you're talking about installing up there is like a reverse wind farm. It's like the energy sucker of all times to run all of those fans up there. It's ludicrous. And you don't have any analysis of the impacts of that. So I want to know what the financial advantage is to these people to finance the Titanic. Okay? There's a little, Army Corps has navigable waters control, so they do, so presumably San Simeon Creek is navigable by some little craft, which you are knee-deep in water in, as well as other elements.
Rick Hawley is followed by Tina Dickinson.
Rick Hawley, I am a resident of Cambria. I was wondering if someone would ask the legal counsel if it would be even legal to sign a contract for a plant that's going to be changing, and you guys know it, it's going to change. And would a bank do business with someone who's breaking the law? I want to know if bankers commonly deal with people who break the law. Well, I guess that's a stupid question, huh? Sorry. You know, what does our legal counsel have to say about this new information about the Coastal Commission, saying this project's going to substantially change, and it may change the whole funding requirements. Something to think about, and something for you people to think about.
I think after I finish these other comments, I do think that we should get a comment from legal counsel. Tina Dickinson's followed by Jeff Hellman.
It's very difficult to come up and even stand before you today, but it's the only opportunity for the public and those who get to see it on slow span or 21. It is beyond shocking. You have brought something to us today that we have not been able to even talk about, but you have a resolution before you to vote on. How you can possibly do it, knowing what you know now, is quite amazing. And I already know one person who has contacted a federal agency, and I will be the second one. Because this is beyond anything any of us could ever have imagined. The gentleman who spoke from the lending agency said that the project, when approved in January of 2015, you, President Beringer, said earlier, the project was going to be up by October of this year. Would you please clarify when this project, if this project, whatever project it might be, will be ready to go? I'm asking you because I'm not a public comment.
The general manager will, would you please?
Where's the engineer?
I don't know where he is, but the general manager, the general manager has intimate details on the many milestones that are involved in having this project complete.
Yeah, the many milestones that it would be nice for the public to have been aware of.
We displayed a 15-foot PowerPoint presentation that showed every milestone and showed it to the public. Mr. Gruber, would you tell us when the milestone of having the project complete is?
We've asked the Regional Water Quality Control Board to hold a special meeting relating to the Title 27 permit, and they're willing to do that. There was about a 29-day period where we felt that due to the emergency that it was being delayed. So we're hoping between the mid-October, beginning of November timeframe as originally stated during the CDM Smith.
Then excuse me, but then can you please tell me why your lending agency representatives said January 2015?
He probably wanted to put a little,
a little space in there?
Space in there.
Really?
The bank probably would like to have known that.
Okay, in January of 2014, the minutes, consideration of a resolution authorizing the use of emergency contract procedures to develop and complete an emergency water supply project, authorizing the general manager to enter into agreements related thereto, and authorizing the transfer of funds from general fund reserves to the water fund. I would like to know if this board has ever approved a project, whether it be temporary or permanent. This language does not imply approval by the board. And also in January of 2014, Mr. Director Cliff said the transfer is listed as a loan. This was on the $2 million. It's necessary to say it is specifically a loan in order to require it to be paid back. That's what we were looking at in January. If just say a transfer from general fund to water fund department can say it was just a transfer. And then Director Thompson's comments were, Director Thompson noted this is for emergency water, not to replace a regular source of water or water that flows through the creeks. He indicated he would like to ensure language placed in contracts include an option to purchase, way back in January of 2014. And Director Clift, in the same meeting, Director Clift said, the Water Alternative Committee is looking for an alternate site, and everything is still on the table and is still being studied. More than one form of off-stream storage is being looked at. When have you ever looked at it? When have you ever brought it to us? And we have been, this is all about growth. This is all about unlock. This is all about the water wait list. And why should we be paying 13.26 or now 13.4 million for them? And you tell us we're out of water? You tell us we're out of water, but yet you're willing to open up the public restrooms. You're willing to allow landscaping of potable water? Please, give us a break.
Thank you. Jeff Hellman, followed by Elizabeth Bettenhausen, please.
Jeff Hellman, I'm a citizen here of Cambria. What you ought to listen to Tina and what she just told you. You guys, unbelievable, unbelievable. If 1/5 of the allegations I've heard hurled against you by very knowledgeable, very people that really know what they're talking about are true, you people, I better just cool it right now because my words for you are not very pleasant. Anyway, conventional wisdom tells us, and human nature tells us, that when you try to take a project and plow it through in the speed of light, you're going to have problems. You're going to have all kinds of stuff come up. I had a project manager, lifetime engineer, tell me every project that's ever been or ever probably will be doesn't fire up on the day you think it's going to be fired up. There's going to be bugs, something's not going to work, some piece of equipment's not going to interface with something else. I looked at the engineering report on the plan, it's highly complex. That thing isn't going to be fired up by January 1st, that's guaranteed. So you're going to sink our whole ship, like Lynn said, the Titanic. If you guys were reasonable, if you had a head on your shoulders that was worthy of being our representatives, you would have done a portable desal. It would have cost us $1.5 million. You would have had plenty of time to do the project properly. You could have had it engineered, you could have worked with the agencies, you could have had all your ducks in a row, and last but not least, and this is what all the meeting is about, we could have done it with a bond issue and not mortgaged our future or been in jeopardy of, losing our thing to a hedge fund or something like that, a bond issue. And you could have taken you would have had plenty of time with portable desal. Why didn't you do it? And as mentioned before, you told us everything was for portable desal, then behind everybody's back, in secret, behind closed doors, it morphs into a permanent plant. And one can only assume or speculate or conjecture that the forces behind that move has to be the people that seem to have you really in their pocket. Well, it's too bad you're not working for the people of Cambria. If you vote no on this, one last thing. Janet Yellen, the only reason I could see that you would want to move forth that would be rational would be to lock in a low interest rate. Bond would be better. However, Janet Yellen, from the chief of the Federal Reserve Board, and all of Congress has assured us that interest rates are going to stay low where they are now, at least through 2015. That gives you a year and a half to do something right. Thank you.
Thank you. And Elizabeth Bettenhausen, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. I forgot my name before, Elizabeth Bettenhausen from Cambria for 12 years plus. I want to point out, and for the record, that I signed the Prop 218 protest because I did not think the project was worth $8.8 million in its current form and description. It was incomplete, insufficient, inadequate, and not yet done. I would like the public record to show, Mr. President,
yes, ma'am.
I would like the public record to show that I hereby formally protest spending $4,250,000 as of today with the update on interest on the $8.8 million that I opposed. And you never asked the community of Cambria, dear board, if they would, majority or plurality, be willing to fund the interest. You told us the maximum we would have to pay was 8.8. And you said the word maximum repeatedly, from meeting to meeting to meeting. You may have slipped in the word financing, but you never factored it into the pictures that you gave us for this project. And now you come back and tell us that we have to pay half again of the total rate for interest. I'm not saying the interest rate is too high necessarily. That's not my position. My position is if you are going to be dearly transparent, as you keep promising us with extraordinarily regularity, you must tell us what we are getting into because of your decisions. And that includes, I repeat, please tell the community of Cambria with a big sign out there, dear Cambrians, we forgot to mention, you will now also have to pay $4,250,000 in order to get the 8.8. So I suggest to you the possibility of open-mindedness on your part, the possibility of having listened to all the excellent suggestions today about getting clear with your state and federal agencies, all the excellent suggestions about getting an immediately available, cheap, temporary desal, and postpone any action on the resolution before you. Because if you don't postpone action, you are endangering the community of Cambria economically and ecologically, as well as in terms of your responsibility to give us a reliable source of water. Thank you.
Thank you. One last time, Ken Butterfield.
My name is Ken Butterfield, and since 12:30, I've heard nobody in favor of your project. Is anybody here in favor of this project?
Yeah, I am.
Are you on the water wait list?
Yeah, I'm
Okay, how about, is everybody here who raised their hand on the water wait list?
No.
Okay, good. So the next question I
comments,
have
please.
is for these finance people, and I would like to know, if you know, besides members of the board who have a conflict of interest here, does Western Alliance own or finance property or projects in Cambria?
If you care to answer that, sure. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ken.
To the best of my knowledge, no.
Thank you.
Western Alliance Bank typically lends through its subsidiaries Bank of Nevada and Torrey Pines Bank to a variety of municipalities in California. To my knowledge, this is the first time they've done any business in the Cambria area. And certainly my contact there, Jim Solt, who I've known for 3 years, has told me as much. So the answer to the gentleman's question is certainly to the best of our knowledge, no.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to bring it back to the board, but one thing I'd like to do is, because I have the same question, and that is on the, whatever it was, on the legality of the issue.
Well, just briefly, this is certainly an unusual situation as far as how we're proceeding, given the fact that we have a initial study, mitigated negative deck, that's also on the agenda today and going to be discussed. But we're proceeding on the basis of the emergency coastal development permit that was issued by the county. And that's the legal approval we have to proceed with this project and build this project. One of the conditions of the emergency coastal development permit was to apply for a regular coastal development permit within 30 days, which the district has done. And the initial study, mitigated negative deck, has been prepared on that regular permit. And so those comments and things that are coming in are related to that. But otherwise, we're proceeding on the basis of the emergency permit that's been issued.
Didn't answer the question.
Doesn't that require showing proof of ownership of the project area? And isn't that why you submitted the 1991 record of survey?
I'm not aware of that. And is legal counsel aware of that?
Right here. Or did you duck out and prove it?
Maybe it disappeared.
Project area as you defined it, you are not eligible for an emergency coastal development permit. I will be at the County Board of Supervisors tomorrow to draw that to their attention. I'm sure it's an oversight that they would like to be aware of.
And it would be one of the challenges that one of the many challenges we would have, for sure. And I'd like to bring that back to the board for any questions or clarifications.
We would like to point out two changes in regards to the documents. Tracy, if you want to point those out. In your documents, it indicates 4.09% interest, which is now 4.11. And in one of the appendices, it references subsection A. I believe it's on page 16, and it really should say subsection B. So those are the only substantive changes that need to be acknowledged before the board takes it and has any consideration. Let me see, do you have that page?
Yes, it is on page 16 in section 5.9, and this has to do with the emergency, the grant. Should the district be in a position to receive a grant and to pay back some of the debt on an emergency basis? And it references, it says, notwithstanding the foregoing provisions of this section, in the event the district prepays the installment payments under section 7.2A, it should say 7.2B.
And also, Tracy handed out a revised sources and uses of fund, which reflects, which is this right here, and we have some copies for the public. This represents the 4.11 versus the 4.09. So we wanted to make sure that I think it equates to about, $1,200 more annually so it's not a substantial amount, but we just want to be forthright with the board on that. And I guess probably at this time, it would be a good time to open any questions up for the board relating to this project, or not, this loan docs, and while we have the consultants here, and any questions that Tracy or myself can answer on this.
Director Rice, perhaps you have a question?
The first question is related to just the agenda order. It seems out of order to be doing the loan document before we even consider anything about the mitigated neg deck. And I understand the staff recommendation on the mitigated neg deck is to be continuing that. We don't really know the full cost of the project, and it is supposed to be an emergency supply, and yet it doesn't seem to be addressing the current immediate emergency. I'm not saying, I think the majority of people in this town, including the 5 people sitting here, would like to increase the reliability of the water supply here in town and want to make sure that what we have the next time that this happens, which could be next year, is that we don't have this kind of crisis again. And I'm fully on board with going in that direction. But if this isn't going to provide us water before what is essentially the rainy season, fingers crossed, I'm a little concerned that we're pushing forward too fast when we're not going to be getting. I'm not saying we stop, and this is where my question comes in, and this is a question for hopefully the general manager or the district engineer, which is a bunch of related questions, but mainly the question is what is the effect of us taking a breath and not doing this particular proposed resolution today? I still haven't really gotten a breakdown of the amount of money that's already been approved to be spent by the general manager on an emergency water supply project, and I've only seen one payment to CDM Smith. We had the CDM Smith contract on the agenda for today, but then it was moved. Are they saying are they not doing any work until we get additional funding? Have we already encumbered and spent all of the money that the board has already approved to be spent out of the general fund, and that this loan will hopefully repay? These are all kind of related questions that have to do with the timing and my concern for the timing of everything. I mean, this is a project that should at best take at least 2 to 3 years to accomplish, and would have allowed for the community to not just have input, but to understand more what it is that we're trying to accomplish. Because this might be the very best thing that we could possibly be doing. But if we haven't had time to take a breath, if we haven't had any peer review, if we have I'm so glad that we have the experts we have, but we haven't had any kind of second opinion on the engineering of it or on the financing of it. And it concerns me because all of us want the best thing for this community, and I'm just genuinely concerned that maybe it might be a good time to say, hey, can we take a breath? I do not want to stop us from getting water. What I do want to do is I want to stop us from coming out on the other end of this endeavor thinking, wait a minute, why did we do that? Because we're all in a panic and trying to get everything done so fast. I really don't want to be an obstacle here, but I do need some answers before I'm comfortable encumbering the community with a huge amount of debt when we didn't even really have that much option in terms of. I also have a question. I'm not sure why, just because we used to do back up our loans with the property tax, I'm not even sure if that's really appropriate, because it seems to me if we were going to spend a portion of property tax on a loan for this project, that we would have to have a full-on, a full-on vote on that. And just because we've done it in the past doesn't necessarily mean that it was right. And even if it's not illegal, it may not be the best way to approach. I mean, I just really want to. I guess I have a lot of questions. I do know this. I've heard from a lot of people in town, and they all support us doing a project, but they all really want us to be doing it right, and they all really see something happening that they feel like they can't even catch their breath. And I admit that that's kind of where I'm coming from too. If this project was twice as much, I really wouldn't mind, as long as we were going through the steps and doing it appropriately. If we were doing the things, there's a reason why there's CEQA. There's a reason why the regulatory agencies do what they do. And it's not just to get in our way. It's because there's prior things that have happened that cause those laws to be put into place and those regulatory agencies to be overseeing what we're doing, so that we don't make a big mistake. And it might be best if we continue this until after we have the agency meeting. I appreciate the support, but really it's kind of disrupting my thought pattern. So if you don't, I appreciate this support, believe me. It's disrupting my thought patterns here, and I really want to make sure that I get this out, because this is a critical decision for all of us, and it's a critical decision for the community, and I really want to make sure that, I don't know how this affects future loans. I don't know if CDM Smith won't sign a contract with us if we don't sign this today. I don't know if staffing the advanced water treatment with an outside consultant would violate the tax status. I mean, that seems like that point was raised pretty critically, and the general manager had spoken to that we might do something like contract that out to somebody, because they have to have a certain level of certification to be able to run the plant. So I don't know if that violates that particular issue. So, I mean, the lender is taking a risk that the project's going to get done, so are we. Let's make sure if we're going to take a risk, we're actually taking the right risk.
Any other directors have a comment? Mr. Gruber, I have a couple questions. Well, yeah, I think that if you could clarify.
What question would you like me to answer? I got 32 written down here. So,
Well, you're a good note taker. Main one would be, the first one would be, does CDM Smith not sign a contract, and how much money do we have left that we've already approved, and would it stop the project if we don't sign this today?
Well, the CDM, remember, we entered into a task order because we wanted to keep this project moving forward, that there was a clause in there called a cancellation clause. And so if we did not move forward, and that's not a reason to or not move forward, but if we didn't move forward, then that cancellation clause would, in other words, they went ahead and worked it out with the vendor for this particular unit that that it would be being fabricated and be on its way. So there would be a 10% cancellation clause, and that was made public. That task order was brought to the board for consideration and approval, and so there'd be a 10% cancellation clause, which is $250,000. And so they're just waiting to mobilize and get the funding in place. I think with regards to the ISM&D, again, as David indicated, there's the temporary facility and the temporary permit that we're working under and gives us the authority to do that. And then there's issues relating to the permanent application. I know there's a lot
I'm not
more
talking
questions.
about canceling the order. I'm talking about taking a moment where we say, what does it actually, I mean, if the only option I have is a payday loan or not having a car, I mean, it's kind of a toss-up sometimes, and I want to make sure.
It was interesting, and the email from the Coastal Commission I did send to the Water Alternatives Ad Hoc Committee. Director Robinette and Director Cliff got it, but I didn't send it to the, let me finish. Stop being rude. I'm respectful to you when you're talking. I don't interrupt you, so please give me the same dignity, please. Thank you. Now, what was I saying?
The agency,
email from the,
right. And you have to understand something. There was a certain amount of irony in the conversations that we had, the regulatory agencies. First, they said they didn't know very much about the project, but then through their comment letters through the ISM&D, were willing to elaborate quite extensively on the project. And so I thought the conversation that we had with the Coastal Commission went really, really well. And matter of fact, the results of that conversation was a recommendation that we all get together and meet and discuss some of these things. But one of the things that I encourage the Coastal Commission staff and the other regulatory agencies to have is an open mind relating to this project, and be open-minded about it. And really, the project itself, the scope of this project is really is a board decision. What the board wants to move forward with and what they want to construct for the community, that's the board's decision. With regards to the environmental and the regulatory issues associated with it, those are things that through conversations and through mitigation measures we feel that we can overcome. Now, one of the things that is consistently mentioned in the regulatory documents for the ISM&D was that concerns relating to habitat, and rightfully so. But again, I think it's a project that's going to actually enhance the environment, and I'm entitled to my. Who called me an idiot? The idiot. Okay. Well, there's more than one idiot in the room, so. But as I explained to the Coastal Commission, by putting 100 gallons of water into a creek that's currently dry, that's going to actually enhance the environment, enhance the environment for the tidewater goby and the other things that are concerns about. So to answer your question, Director Rice, I think it's a good idea to meet with Coastal Commission staff, and I think there needs to be a willingness on their part to allow us to address some of the concerns that they have and show that we can mitigate some of these concerns, and not just say, well, this project is DOA. I think it's a project that if the concerns are addressed, I think the project can move forward in a timely manner.
And will CDM Smith stop work if we do not approve this loan today?
They'll continue to do the work that they're doing as far as the tracer study goes and working with the regulatory agencies and working on the permanent application, so it won't stop, but it won't allow us to complete the project on time.
On time being the mid-November time range that we're or the mid-October time range that you've said. And we may find out in September, maybe October. They're saying, I'll know more after I go to the meeting on Wednesday about the grant money, and that might position us better. Knowing that we're actually going to get that may position us better, so we don't have to pay a 5% penalty. I mean, I would like to know the impact, and I understand we've got this is bird in hand, and I definitely am aware of that, but this is maybe not the bird in hand that we need to be having and I really want to know what the impact, if this does not get approved and allowed today. I understand we have to go back out and do other things, and there may be other options, and that the timing will be different. I understand that. Seems to me the timing is already off of when we need to be having water available, and we would have to have another way to get water if we don't have this running by October. So I'm just trying to see what is the actual effect, because I personally, reading through this, being as educated as I am, I'm not a financial person, but reading through this as carefully as I can and listening to the comments today, this doesn't seem like, just because it's the only one we've got, it doesn't seem like we should be approving this, because it doesn't seem like a good deal. I don't think we should just approve the only deal we've been offered. And that doesn't mean the project, that's why I want to know, is CDM Smith is going to stop work? Are we going to run out of money? How soon? Is it possible that we can finagle it so that we can manage to keep going, and then by next summer season actually have something up and running, but not with an encumbered loan like this that's got the extra interest and the extra questionable that some of the community brought up about what's going on with it? I'm not saying that our consultants have done a bad job. What I'm saying is I just don't think that this is the right way to go right this minute. And I don't want to be stopping entirely, because if it's another dry summer, we need to have something in place.
And if I know Bob's in the back there, and I may have forgot something relating to your question about what impact it's going to have. I'm speaking from a general term that whatever the board decides to do today, whether they decide to approve it, which will keep the project moving forward, if they decide to defer it, and whatever the board decides, then of course there'll be implications relating to the finish date on that. But if Bob could come up here and maybe kick Tracy out of her seat for a couple minutes and answer that question, because I feel like I have an answer in its entirety to you, Director Rice, and I think that some different, oh no, you don't have to leave, Tracy. Bob's up at the podium. But I think there's some additional explanations related to the impact it will have. And again, I think everybody, whether you're for the project or against the project, whether you're for the rate increase or not for the rate increase, I think one thing that we can all agree on is, because of the situation, because of the drought right now, because of the sense of urgency, we've taken a path that probably isn't the most the best path, but we've done it out of necessity, and the board has taken a position that they want to have a reliable source of water for the community based on the current drought conditions. So all the comments that I've heard are good comments relating to RFPs, competitively bidding, those type of things in a perfect environment. You're seeing water agencies throughout the state of California. We had some conversations earlier doing almost these same type of things just out of necessity. So if it's okay with the President, I'll let Bob comment a little bit on that.
If it's okay, if I could just interrupt for a moment, just to maybe set the stage for what Bob can talk about. And that is, in looking at past board approvals, the board did authorize the general manager to execute the contract with CDM Constructors, subject to the terms being acceptable to the general manager and legal counsel, and an agreement has been in the process of being developed. So that's why that item you alluded to, the decision was it really wasn't necessary at this time. And otherwise, I know Bob can speak to what's been going on in terms of a review process with respect to issues relating to design and costs and things like that.
Sure, I'll talk about the schedule, and then if you want me to go beyond that, I'd be glad to elaborate further, but just interested in being brief. The schedule that we're working under is really dictated by the Emergency Coastal Development Permit, which has 180 days to complete construction. So that date is November 14th, and that's the date that we are working, striving to get construction done by the November 14th date. In my opinion, if the financing isn't there, we can't enter into this agreement that David just mentioned that we're in the middle of working out, where we'd go past that November 14th date. And then you'd be subject to the county being willing to extend that date. So you kind of lose a little bit of the control then at that point. You're going to be subject to the county extending that November 14th date. And we are doing our best and working with CDM Smith to make sure we get it done by then.
Can you comment on the, someone alluded to the fact that our boundaries might be wrong as far as with the state. Do you have any knowledge in that?
Yes, this came up when we were actually doing the emergency coastal development permitting, where I was questioned about this by county planning staff at the time. And we did do a little research, and we found that there was a record of survey that was different from the county's APN map. So the county has online GIS data for their APN lines that are shown for the parcels. And there's an kind of artifact where it shows the parcel line going into that percolation pond area. Those percolation ponds have been in operation since about 1994. So there was actually a record of survey that is different from the APN lines that are shown online with their GIS database. So I've sent that record of survey onto the county planning department, asking them to please go over this with your GIS department and make whatever corrections are necessary for that particular boundary line, because it was causing some confusion. Now, I did, when I stepped out, I did again call county parks or state parks to see if they had anything differently. I haven't heard back from them. So that's the best understanding I have at this point in time, that our record of survey would trump that old parcel boundary.
And Mr. Hirsch, would you see that as a formidable challenge to?
From what I'm hearing, it sounds like we have information that shows that site is ours. But
right. It's an issue that we'll definitely have to deal with. Yeah. So, thank you.
So maybe something that would help me, since this is a decision that all of us have to make. Maybe it would help me to hear what you all are thinking, that if this is a good idea, or why you would support it or don't have objections, or didn't seem to have a lot of questions. I really do want to understand it. I want us to make a good decision.
Do you want to take a crack at that, Mr. Clift?
Yeah, we're working under an emergency permit, and as Mr. Gresham said, that emergency permit technically runs out on November 15th, 14th, something there. We can delay this, but you won't make that permit. You won't get it done. You won't meet the bank's requirements. And what you will end up doing is starting over, and you won't have what I am concerned with is a facility in place that can meet the needs of this community fairly quickly, as quick as possible. I wish it had been online today, because then I wouldn't have to make another bad decision on this next item coming up. But I am now, always have been, for moving forward with this. I will vote to move forward with this, and it is a matter of getting this online. This is a setup to be used only when we're in these drought stage 3 conditions. It is not the thing to turn this place into Los Angeles that so many people seem to be concerned about. It's something that we need to do, that the people of this community did not object to the rates. That's untrue. That's untrue. 800 people objected to the rates. A whole lot of people, 4 times that amount, didn't object to the rates. Who's the...
Mr. Butterfield, would you please
Mr. Butterfield, the next time you come to the mic, I will overtalk you everything you say. Understand that? Yeah.
Please. Continue.
I'm finished.
Okay.
I'm finished. I'm going to move forward on this.
Mr. Thompson?
Yeah, I think that Mr. Clift was quite correct in his comments. The issue of water has been politicized in this community for at least the last 20 years, and by many of the same cast of characters that we have at this time. And I personally will not be bullied by people who stand up at that podium with some vague threats of conflict of interest and whatever. During the Prop 218 process, a friend told me about somebody who got up on his front porch and talked about directors with their hands in the cookie jar. And that's flat out slander. And if that person is here, I suggest you identify yourselves and then we can talk about it. But my commitment is basically to provide this community with a secure source of water during this emergency. It's necessary to go forward. I may not like all the details, but it's important that we go forward. I don't want to have anybody turning on their taps in December and having sand come out. I've got enough grit in my shower right now that it's just tough to get a steady flow. And the people in this community, the people that elected me 4 years ago, want to have a safe and secure source of water. And that's what I intend to provide and vote for. And I will not be bullied by people who stand up here and suggest that I have a conflict of interest without telling me what that is. And not one that I know of.
Thank you, Director
with
Thompson.
that, I intend to vote for this and move forward.
And okay, Ms. Robinette?
Thank you. As much as I would like for things to be perfect, I have found so far in my journey that they're not, or at least they're not at this time with the conversation we're having here. I will be supporting this. I wish that we weren't here today having this conversation. I wish, in fact, people would have been able to complete things, as some have mentioned that we've been here before, because it needed to get done. We now, from everything we all read, as much as we can gather evidence, we are in a serious situation in this state, in the western United States, and we don't have any way to know that we won't run out of water. What we have is an indication that we very likely could run out of water. And the ramifications of that and what it would cost us and the impact it would have on people here today and the rest of our community is not worth the gamble for me. There are people who have supported Prop 218. There are people who have opposed it. But I believe we have far more people that gave a rather clear message that they wish for us to continue. And so I want to honor that.
Just, can I, if you don't,
Sure, go ahead.
if you don't mind,
Director Rice.
I just want to make sure that, to me, part of the gamble going on for me is I feel really comfortable, actually. The general manager, the district engineer have both said we can rely on Santa Rosa right now only because we're doing the tracer test and we've gotten an exception to the permit so that we could do that. I don't feel like we're in danger of running out of water right this minute. I feel like it's a gamble that we may not be able to, under an emergency permit, we may be able to do this project. I'm concerned that the gamble may be that we get this loan and then have to pay it back, and we don't have a long-term anything to count on. And that worries me. And if that's not a concern of the other four directors, then maybe I'm misunderstanding what the reality is that's going on here, because emergency permit, $8 million project, CDP $8 million project, but it's already been paid for under the emergency and being done under the emergency. But if we can't keep it because the CDP, or it has to change significantly because of this, I mean, this originally in the tech memo was a different amount entirely. It was a much more expensive project that some things were taken out of, and it can't be $8 million to just not underground pipes. So I'm just, this is where my core concern is, and I just want to make sure that I understand where you guys are coming from, because, I mean, this is a board decision that I really want to be on board with. We need water. I haven't heard anybody on this board say anything other than that. My specific concern is this specific encumbrance of debt.
Right. With that in mind, I'd like to make a comment. Alan McKinnon had a nice write-up in the paper, and it reminded me of what I started to do about 18 months ago or so, when he gave me a disc on the road E-systems, and I had gotten information about this solar plant that they have in Fresno. And maybe staff doesn't even know this. I picked up the phone and I called each of them, and I wanted to have one of those units. Give me a quote on how quick you can get me this desal unit. And they wouldn't sell them to me because they knew that we couldn't have the permits. And I found out later that Mr. Gruber could not even order one of his staff to turn it on. So it was the ideal, it was what we were thinking about, and it has morphed, but it's morphed into a better way. If you take a letter not too many years ago, maybe a year ago, from the Coastal Commission, they said, gee, what you should do, Cambria, is you should reprocess your wastewater. You should do a water recycle program. This is not, it does have a small element of desal, but it's only 10%. CDM Smith in the 14th showed us very clearly that you're actually just going to filter out, and 90% of that water is going to go directly into your aquifer. 250 acre-feet is enough. Previous boards might have wanted 600 acre-feet, and they wanted to do whatever they wanted to do with it. But 250 acre-feet extra during the summer months is almost a third of our total annual use. It is enough to get us to have a reasonable quality of life, not drive around with tanks in the back of the trucks. And Ms. Webb's, Jim Webb, has related to me several times that this is a very good project, and yes, that lagoon is empty. If this project would be in use today, I wanted to drive by to confirm that that lagoon is really suffering, but we would put in 100 gallons a minute into the lagoon, and it would improve, in fact, our ability to support steelhead. Okay, well, okay, maybe you said it to me privately, and okay. All right. I believe you heard it too. He did say that there are a couple, that he's not totally, totally, okay. But what he told me, I'm not going to go into it. I'm not going to go into it because, Ms. Webb, you know that you will easily distort things purposefully. And let me explain. The 184 acre feet that, okay. At Amanda's meeting.
At Amanda's meeting, I distorted something?
Yes.
Really, what was that, Mr.
You said
Granger?
we're going to waste
134 acre feet.
Okay.
And I finally found the reference for that. It's CDM Smith, Alternative 4, page 6.4. And sorry, I didn't have it last time at that meeting, and I guess I should have actually read it. Here again,
take a look at minute 14 through 15 and a half on the July 4th presentation by CDM Smith. Anyway, I'm going to move on.
So what it said was that the percentage of recovery would increase for longer durations under more extreme drought conditions as basin inflow decreases. If the emergency project is only operated for 3 months, all the water would be pumped from the basin and not from the project. That is what your consultant said. I am not a liar. I don't distort, and don't even go there with me.
I apologize.
Can I bring,
apologize.
can I bring this back
How-
to the,
how many
to the,
days-
can I bring this back to the
We'll
financing?
bring this back to the
I just have a quiet question,
One
okay?
quiet question,
Can any
please.
director tell me how many days it will be before any water gets from, it's treated, let's say it's all built and it's treated, and it's been sent up, it's injected. How many days will it be before any of that water reaches SS1 or SS2, that we're actually getting? Okay, in 3 months, nothing gets there, Mary.
But
It takes
not that there's a void there.
133 days for any to show up.
But it's not,
It
there's a void
takes-
there. There's not a void there. More water is going to come out. It's a reliability of fresh water.
Well,
Perhaps you-
so in other words, we're just using the basin water that's anyway.
Ma'am?
We're going to spend $13 million to get
Yes.
something that you have to turn on in April for it to deliver water in August.
Please, please
100 and-
review.
I'm
the-
looking at
the-
your groundwater
The July
appendices.
14th presentation by CDM Smith makes it very simple. Now, thank you.
Groundwater appendices.
Thank you.
It will take between 160 and 200-something days for 50% of the water that's coming out of those drinking water wells to be from this. It's going to take
And-
5 to 6 months to get it so 50% of the water is the treated water.
But in the meantime, the underflow is continuing to go toward the ocean. We're recovering the 500,000 gallons.
There's
You know, I'm not gonna get
nothing
into-
quick, there's
Ma'am?
nothing quick or immediate about this, is all I'm saying.
That's what I was, I'm supporting this project because it's the right project. It's
I'm not about to-
environmentally friendly project.
This-
And it's a recycle project that I'm going to support. I would like to call.
This item that we are supposed to be discussing is not whether or not we do this project. This
Right.
is whether or not we commit this community to paying off the loan that is proposed as part of the resolution. And part of that is, it includes that if we don't get enough from the extra rate that was just approved by the board, that we also have to, any net revenues from the entire water fund, which means that any other money coming that we need to be using to run the water system other than that project would also have to be paid to the lender before we can use it to run the system. Don't object to the project at the moment. That's not even the discussion. The discussion is this particular way to finance it. And I hear that there's already at least 3 votes to go this direction with the financing, but it is problematic to say the least when we don't even have a full description. We haven't even looked at approving a CEQA document yet. It's troubling that this is the way that it's going down, and I understand there's reasons because of the emergency. That doesn't mean that we should be going at it wrong. It means that we need to be extra careful about that what we are doing that isn't necessarily directly in line with what would be done right if we had the full time. It means that we make sure that since we don't have the full time, that we do everything we can to make sure that we're not doing it wrong just because we're in a rush. I mean, I don't run in heels because I will fall down. I walk carefully.
Our guys don't wear heels.
Let me ask the finance manager what a one-day delay would mean.
Potentially change the interest.
Well, assuming that you can notice a special meeting and get through those issues, we're currently targeting, per the requirements of mobilization on the 11th, the project mobilization requirements, to fund on Thursday. Friday is a working day, I suppose, but we have certain issues with respect to getting documents in and out of San Francisco that create some challenges for us, and the bond counsel, Chick Adams, has kindly agreed to transport documents today, so I'm not sure we'll be able to meet the mobilization deadline.
So mobilization means that they start buying equipment and...
No, I'm going to defer to the district engineer on mobilization, or maybe the general manager, but it was my understanding that mobilization, that they would have people coming on site and
Right.
Yeah.
Right, but we could pay them out of general funds. We wouldn't have to have this money in hand necessarily. And CDM Smith has come here several times, and I asked him how long does it take to actually produce a product if they didn't have any obstacles, and they said 10 weeks. So, Mr. Gressens, would you address that?
The question is, what is mobilization?
Yeah, what does mobilization mean?
That's when the contractor will start moving on to the site. I mean, they'll have some equipment, usually they'll, I'm sure they'll have their construction trailers moved in on that particular day, start setting up their earthwork equipment and so forth. So it's the actual first day of the field work that's going to occur.
Okay, and that's, the 11th is Monday. I think we should proceed with all due dispatch. Ms. Monique, or Ms. Madrid, would you take a roll call vote? Well, no, we need a motion in a second, that's right.
And we'd also ask that you'd adjourn briefly if the board does approve this to sign the docs.
I think it's done.
Okay.
It's time.
Monique? We need a motion, yeah.
I would move adoption of Resolution 33-2014, authorizing the installment self-financing of an emergency water supply project in the aggregate principal amount not to exceed $9 million and approve related documents.
Do I have a second? Mr. Thompson seconded it, and would I have a roll call vote, please?
Director Clift?
Yes.
Director Thompson?
Yes.
Director Rice?
No.
Vice President Robinette?
Yes.
President Berger?
Yes. We'll have a recess until let's say 3:20, because we have to be out of here by 5, so 3:20. Mr. Gruber. I have one. 3B.
Are we on 3B?
Yep.
This is, thank you, President Berenger. This is discussion and consideration to review distribution of usage of non-potable water for the SR1 well. This was brought back to us. You asked me to bring this back to you. Just want to update you that, from an email that I got from Justin this morning. I had asked him I had indicated here that I showed you where some of the WBE wells are. Just as a point of clarification, we have a draft urgency permit right now, and that we're finalizing. And so there are some things that they want us to include in that urgency petition as it relates to monitoring, and we're receptive to that. So we're really close to getting that urgency petition. And but I've indicated here what the thought of the board was. Well, why don't we see if the SR1 well has any impact on the WBE well? At least that's what direction I thought I got from the board. And as you can see here, on July 21st, it had fallen below 3 feet. It was at 2.87. On July 28th, it was at 2.87, and then July 30th, it was at 2.9. And as of today, which was August 4th, 2014, it was at 2.84. So it continues, as you can see, it continues to drop down, and we're no longer taking water from the SR1. Now, I know the Filtronics plant has taken a long time, and I've also heard our constituents share their concerns about limited staff and things like that. And so Justin has been handling this, and he's done a really good job. But just a little background information on the Filtronics plant and the SR1 and SR3. So when the Filtronics plant was shut down 10, 12 years ago, in any filtering process, whether it's reverse osmosis or desal or whatever, there's a shutdown process that you're supposed to follow, and that process obviously wasn't followed. They just shut it down. So that there was some filter media issues. If it would have been preserved properly and some of the shutdown things would have been done properly, it probably would have expedited the process. One of the backwash tanks too, talking about the shutdown process, they did not kill the power to it, and so we found this out. And what happened is there's a process called electrolysis. When you hit metal with a electrical current, it has a tendency to corrode. And what happened is one of those, the bottom of the tanks totally corroded out. So these are the things that we had to keep improving on and replacing. So you'll see a brand new backwash water tank out there. So David from Filtronics will be here this week, August 6th or 7th, to help me fine-tune the operations of the plant. He is likely to be here to meet with Jeff Densmore on August 8th. So Jeff Densmore is from California Department of Public Health, and there was an old operating manual. One of the things the state requires before you just turn on a filtering plant is that you have an operation manual that they feel comfortable with, that staff feels comfortable with. And we got a revised CDM, we got a revised Filtronics operation manual, and we made a few tweaks to it. But again, this is an example of a regulatory agency working with the CCSD, understanding the severity of the water situation here in town. And so he'll be here, Jeff will be here on August 8th. We'll need to do a bacteriological test, a BACT test on that following Tuesday. And again, Jeff will be here, Jeff Densmore from the California Department of Public Health will be here on the 7th of the 8th to inspect the Filtronics plant and finalize the operations plan. So I know this has been a long process, but we anticipate being able to put that into operations shortly after the 7th of the 8th. And essentially what we have is a new system. I won't spend too much time on this, but I have to take the opportunity. If you remember all the work that we did on the SR4 well, when it had that catastrophic failure, we realized that there was a lot of things missing, a lot of fail-safe capabilities, a lot of automation, a lot of SCADA, a lot of monitoring capabilities for chlorine, pH, all those type of things, turbidity. We've incorporated all that into the Filtronics plant. So we have a brand new wells. We've taken the wells out. We've put submergible wells in. We've put an instrumentation room in. We've replaced all the valves with actuators and the interface with the instrumentation and everything like that. So that should be up and running soon. So I've talked about the urgency permit, where we are on that. I've talked about that we did shut off the non-potable water system for the community. And I talked about the monitoring wells being down to 2.84 feet right now. And it's my recommendation at this time that staff recommends, and the board can deliberate this and give me some direction on this, but staff does not recommend any changes this time regarding the distribution of usage of non-potable water from the SR1 well. And maybe, I think maybe President Berenger can reference another alternative that's possibly available, encouraging people to do like what Director Robinette does, and what I do is that we catch the water, we put it out in the yard, and that works real well. But that's what I just basically wanted to go over and see if there's any questions that I had from the board. Now there was some discussion about bringing two other items back at a later date and time, and the board did mention preliminarily some kind of water budget, and everybody has that allocation, and really essentially allowing them to do what they want to do with that water. And the second issue that was brought forth was the public restrooms and things. So I'm just looking for some direction at this point on what you want to do. I've heard a lot of feedback from both sides on this, and with that, I'll just turn it back over to the board, and maybe I can answer any questions that you may have at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Gruber. I do have two slips of people to speak.
And I'm disappointed. I wish there'd be far more, because there's no good solution to this one. I know that for sure. But I have Sigrid Costanza. Okay, and Elizabeth Bettenhausen. Is Ms. Dickinson still here? I was hoping she could help us, actually.
What questions would you like me to ask?
Well, I was...
I'm kidding, don't take it seriously. I need some assistance, and this is really a serious request to understand this. The WBE monitoring well goes down when?
When the creek flow slows down, and we don't have adequate recharge, that Windsor Bridge East goes down.
Now, my question then, thank you, sir, because I understood that on July 21st, it was 2.87. That's in your page, on page 60 of today. July 28th, 2.87. July 30th, 2.90. But now it's down to 2.84. Do you have any idea whether it is the tracer test or the shutting off of SR1 that is causing this to be the lowest rate since July 21st? Now, I realize it's a short period of time, and not everybody is out there every second of the day taking measurements, but I'm a little curious, if it's still only 2.84, why you need the urgency permission, because it doesn't seem to be declining dramatically rapidly. On what basis are you making this decision? I want to say something else, even though you aren't timing me, sir, I'll just keep talking for about an hour.
We do have to get out by 5 o'clock.
Right, okay, I got an hour and a half. I want to say something about, and this, it's going to sound totally self-aggrandizing, I'm going to say it anyhow. My sister and I, she's an adult too, we use 2 units bi-monthly. 2. Now, I want to make a standing invitation to all of you. My sister will hate me for this because she doesn't like people coming to drop by looking at our garden. I would like you to come and look at the blooming trichocereus in our garden. How do I spell that? T-R-I. You know how I spell it, though, when I'm writing stuff? I say trick regular, O, and then serious, like, and I'm serious now, trichocereus. It's a wonderful cactus, like our whole garden is. And it gets blossoms that deep as trumpet blossoms and 8 inches in diameter. But I shouldn't say it. The one plant gets them white and has had last year 110 in one sequence. Now we've got some others that are red like you wouldn't believe. I mean, redder than the flag even. And they're the same size. And you know what? 0 is the amount of water we give them. 0. So I understand if people want to, Director Clift, I have to talk to you sometime. I haven't the vaguest idea what statue you were watering in that KSBY tape. That was a little weird. And they keep showing it. It's on regularly on KSBY. And you're watering a statue with a hose. We don't do that at our place. But I want you, friends, to be consistent. If we have a water emergency, absolutely tell people don't use water that's not utterly essential for your bodily functions. And you might even want to tell us how much that is. We tend to get by at our place on 12 gallons per person per day. 12. I know 3 is the emergency, Director Robinette. I heard you last meeting, and I very much appreciated what you said. 12 is sort of 4 times as much as the emergency level. But you've been telling us for a decade that we're sacrificing when we use only as much as we do. Oh, friends, we got to start talking in this town like we live on planet Earth, and that we care about the quality of life, but that we aren't dodos who just keep using everything up without the consequences in our minds.
Thank you. And I have another, Burton Gilpin.
I'm Bert Gilpin. I'm a resident of Cambria. I'm a professional geologist, hydrogeologist, and engineering geologist. And I'm always reluctant to speak at these things for fear of humiliating not only myself but everybody else here, because it is hard to get the data. I mean, somebody mentioned that it's hard to see in the last discussion what the project description is, and I've tried my best, and it is difficult to determine in detail what all the project entails. But in the case of the wells on Santa Rosa Creek, I've used the well for my own yard. I appreciate it. I would say that if you do discontinue it, then you do everything possible to get those wells back on the grid, because it's my understanding that a number of the wells haven't always been on the grid. I did get some data that showed some of the history going back to the 80s, the well field production from the well field, Santa Rosa Creek and San Simeon. And it seems like one was always doing real well versus the other. So one field wasn't producing much, then the other was producing all, and it kind of goes back and forth. So I would say that if I were in your shoes, I would try to get both fields operating at capacity and consistently. If that means raising fees to improve infrastructure, I think that's probably money well spent. But get those wells online before you do a final design on this other project. The message is, at least to me, the message has been that, like some people have said, we have this critical situation, but we're still pumping from the same aquifer when we're pumping from the rodeo grounds. We're still using the same water, and frankly, when I use those wells and irrigate and stand with a hose, it's not nearly as efficient as when the water's coming through the grid and into my drip system. So that's all I would say is do your best to get those wells back online, particularly if they're not going to be available for irrigation.
Thank you. I just want to, Ms. Bettenhausen's comment, and yours too, perhaps. The Windsor Bridge East well is such that when it goes below 3 feet, we can't pump from Santa Rosa. It's a permit issue. We have applied for, and likely will get a waiver that allows it to go down to 2 feet. Something that I'm not as comfortable with, but we're in an emergency situation. But if that well were to go below 3 feet, it doesn't allow us to pump out of Santa Rosa, which includes the SR4 well, which has a fair amount of water by the high school still. And so the SR4 well, from a technicality, and it's not really the same aquifer. SR1 and 2 are right down there by the creek, and we're pulling underflow from there. But SR4, there's a small barrier there, so we can use that water, and it really doesn't affect the WBE well at the beach. But pumping from SR1 and 2 probably will, because it's closer to the Windsor Bridge well. That's my understanding anyway. I'm not a hydrologist, but I'm learning a lot over the last little bit. Does any director have an opinion? Director Robinette.
Well, yes, on this item before us, I have a couple of things, and one actually starts, though, back with looking at the WBE well levels. And I am wondering about the impact. I also live on the same hill with Elizabeth, and we have the county park there, and I'm wondering if there's an impact on this monitoring well. There were people the other day, I was just out for my walk, and I don't know why this is allowed, but there are spigots there with water, and people had the water turned on, letting it run, kids having water fights, people coming by and rinsing sand off their feet, and the biggest sort of miniature water lake out there and on that side of the park that you've ever seen. So just because of where it's located, and I know it's county, but it's still the same aquifer, you know, they're still running with their bathrooms, still running with the outdoor showers, and using all the water they seem to feel they need whatsoever for kind of water aquatics with the faucets running. So that's one thing. And I don't know if anyone knows that.
Well, I've always, and the county has been really, really working collaboratively with us over the last year or so. I spend a lot of time outside, whether it's on the ranch or walking Moonstone or hiking, and I noticed that, or I always felt that there was a direct correlation between the well at the county park and the impact on the lagoon, and that's one of those things that nobody ever wants to talk about or discuss. And I noticed that when the county did turn their well off for a significant period of time, and I noticed that there was a recharge in that lower Santa Rosa aquifer in that lagoon area. So I think there's some habitat issues there also. But I think that they've turned it back on. They're irrigating their grass again. So my answer, and I'm not a hydrogeologist, but you know, the physical proximity of that park and that well to our WBE well is a stone's throw away. There is no correlation between the WBE well and the San Simeon well field. Those are too far apart. I've often wondered, because of the distance between the WBE well and the SR1 and SR3 and even the SR4, if there's truly a correlation because of the physical distance between where the WBE well is. But that's something that was issued in the permit a long time ago. There's other environmental impacts too that I feel that other regulatory or other agencies have other than just the CCSD. So we've talked about the county. I've always felt that the dumping station at state parks, which is essentially a septic system, has an adverse environmental impact on the San Simeon Creek. And we talk about the green algae bloom. And green algae blooms are indicative of nitrates, and nitrates are indicative of dumping stations and septic tanks, not so much as a secondary wastewater treatment plant. So those are things that, as we look at the overall environment, that we need to be aware of, and the impacts that not just the CCSD has, but the county and state parks and things like that. And I'd eventually like to see the county get off that well and possibly bring truck water in, and I'd like to eventually see state parks get away from their dumping station and stop allowing their campers to have a septic tank in a close proximity to the creek. And so there's other things that need to be addressed too. And I don't have the data to prove these things, but I just kind of, you know, have a feeling that well there at the county is not only impacting our WBE well, but it's also impacting the lagoon.
Thank you.
Thank you. One more question, and then Mr. Thompson.
Okay. Then the only other is just kind of an observation, and today many people in the audience did talk about their concerns that with SR1 and SR3 that you know, they might be used in conjunction with people choosing how they want to use their water budget. We've talked about the water budget in Severity 3. We have set this up with 2 units per month per person if they've signed up. But I have really reflected on this too, and we are in a very serious drought, and so I have also been rethinking, would we allow people to use that water budget that way? And at this time, I couldn't do that. The other thing that I think is very important is before we actually can utilize SR1 and SR3, I have to have, just for public safety, I have to have definite assurance from Chevron and from the old Union 76 for SR3 that they can absolutely assure our community that there is no risk for us with contamination. Those would be 2 other things that before we actually made decisions, I would have to have somebody from those agencies assure us of that.
Director Thompson?
Yeah, I support the staff recommendation of making no changes at this point. As you recall, the reason for bringing the potable water into the rodeo grounds and making it available to the community was basically to mitigate some of the hardships imposed upon them based upon the Stage 3 prohibition of outdoor irrigation. And I think that that was the appropriate thing to do. But now that we're having the tracer test, I think we need to be very prudent in terms of the Santa Rosa wells and continue with very careful monitoring. Also, just a suggestion with regards to the portable or public restroom issue. It was suggested by the tourist board that that they wanted to increase the amount of cleaning of the existing bathrooms, porta potties, but it perhaps makes more sense to see if we can get together with the tourist board and have an upgrade of the existing porta potties. I know that when I went to events at the Hearst Castle warehouse, the Hearst warehouse that the Friends of the Elephant Seals put on, there were some very elaborate restrooms there with mirrors and water basins and everything else, to where you really didn't feel like you were using a porta potty. And so perhaps we could see if the Honey Hut folks could give us a deal on something like that as an alternative.
I'd be more than happy to work with them on that, and I believe what you're referring to is the ones that are brought in. They're brought in on trailers, and they're a lot nicer. They're you know, and maybe there's some funding available there, but in the interim, I'll make sure that we at least get those cleaned out on more of a regular basis, because I've got quite a few emails regarding that too. So I think there's a balance, and there's a compromise and a solution, and it may not be opening them back up, but getting something that's a little more nicer to use. And then it would also, I've got some complaints from a lot of the restaurant owners that, that the people just come into their restaurants and because they don't want to use so there's solutions to all this stuff. So.
Director Rice?
Question on the county well. Does the county have a permit for that well? And do they monitor the levels and things like that? Because that could figure into something the Coastal Commission's been asking us to do for a couple of decades, which is the in-stream flow, and what are the impacts on the in-stream flow of our pumping, which would give us some of this data that would be critical. But if we don't have the data for the county wells, then figuring out the impact on the WBE is almost, well, would be impossible, at least if we don't have any data.
I don't know. I'd defer to Bob on that. I'm sure they have information regarding the depth of the well, the production, and things like that. I'm not sure if they.
I mean, certainly they have some sort of permit.
Yeah, I'm not sure if they take static levels or pumping levels or drawdowns or anything like that, like we do on our wells.
Right.
Maybe something that they could do is install an instrument like we did, which is a data analoger that gives us real-time information on that well. So we'll look into that and get an answer for you. But again, I definitely feel that it impacts our WBE well, and I feel that it definitely impacts the lower lagoon there.
And having that data would help back up that assertion, and I don't see any reason why that instinct wouldn't be correct. It seems to make all the sense in the world. I would move that.
Let me weigh in real quick if you
Oh yeah, you.
I don't. Well, anyway, I just wanted to mention that since last time when we were discussing this, I was talking about we were thinking about having Mr. Warren's well support the the people that need water, and I misrepresented myself to Mr. Warren. And by the way, I apologize, Mary, for saying that, but it was an accident on my part. In that I said, well, I found out since then that San Simeon won't let people come and take their water. It was really the community of San Simeon using their treated water that they won't let people, Cambrians, go there and get the treated water from there. But of course, they can still get the water on San Simeon Creek Road and from Clyde's place. And we exchanged a few emails. I think we have that misrepresentation has been cleared up, and it can happen. And I also like the idea of upgrading or doing something at least to get them cleaned twice. I don't even know how much money we're spending on that. We should figure that out. We, of course, could make more money if we let people use the water, but I still like the idea, maybe it's my idea, I like the idea of having a low water user be able to use their water for whatever they want. If they're well below their allocation, they should be able to save a tree. But it looks like that's not part of this particular discussion, and we're going to maybe postpone this, or what would the motion be, Director Rice?
That we go with the staff recommendation of no changes regarding distribution and usage of non-potable.
Is that a motion?
Yes, it is.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, moving on to 4B. 4A. 4A.
Thank you, President Berenger. This is a public hearing to consider the adoption of the Cambria Emergency Water Supply Project Title II Engineering Report. I'm going to turn this over to District Engineer Bob Greshams and just have him give the board a little background on the report, the process, the timeline associated with it, and essentially what you're adopting today to have a better understanding of what the Title 22 Engineering Report is.
Thank you, Jerry, Mr. President. Yes, item 4A is to consider adoption of the Title 22 Engineering Report. However, in discussions with Department of Public Health, which is now Division of Drinking Water, they've been reorganized, they advised me that we do not necessarily have to adopt it today, but they did suggest that we extend receiving comments until at least August 15th. In this case, staff has recommended receiving comments up until 4 o'clock on the 18th of August. So just a little clarification. It's not that obvious when you see the subject title on the staff report, because originally when this agenda was developed, we thought you'd be requested to actually adopt the report. The Title 22 report was fairly well summarized in the special meeting on July 14th that you all attended. So I won't go back through that PowerPoint unless you want more explanation. It's the report itself. I have a copy of it here. It's with all the appendices. It's a couple inches thick, but it was posted on our website on August 3rd of this month, or I'm sorry, July 3rd of last month. We had a few difficulties with some of the appendices, so they are subsequent to that August or July 3rd date that got on the website in its entirety. The way the Title 22 permitting works, it's in conjunction between the Division of Drinking Water staff and the Regional Water Quality Control Board staff in the issuance of that permit. The Division of Drinking Water, CDPH, is what I still call them quite a bit because they just reorganized July 1st, are working collaboratively with the regional board in the Central Coast office to process the Title 22 permit. The actual requirements that we're meeting are it was a 2004 groundwater replenishment regulations that went into effect on June 18th of 2014. That is because there's a certain percentage of treated wastewater that's getting treated in the advanced water treatment plant before being re-injected into the groundwater aquifer. That is the whole purpose of our tracer study that's going on right now to proof the hydraulic model that was done earlier. So at this point, I wasn't planning on going through the details. I just encourage you to receive any comments the public may have, and that we allow subsequent comments to be received up until the August, let me look that date up again, I just had it in front of me. It was the August 18th date at 4 o'clock. And we'll pass those comments, any from today as well as up until that date, onto the Division of Drinking Water and the regional board staff, as well as our project team, to take into further consideration as that permit moves forward. Okay.
Thank you. I do have one slip, Mr. Crosby Schwartz. Speak on 4A.
President and Board, Crosby Swords, Cambria. I have a comment on the design of the proposed advanced wastewater treatment plant. As you can tell by reading some of the comments, one of the major problems is the disposal of the wastewater. And I just wanted to clarify, I've brought this up before, there is an alternative to that. The water treatment plant that they're doing up in Faribault, California, is going to be designed to have zero wastewater disposal. The way they do that is they simply continue accelerated evaporation of the wastewater using heat from the sun, which they collect with solar collectors, and they eliminate all the water out of the wastewater stream, and they end up just with salt. Basically, it's a granular product is what you end up with. So this, of course, would eliminate having to have the wastewater evaporation pond or a direct ocean discharge or new injection wells or whatever, because you simply truck away a small amount of granular waste product. I urge you to look into this. I don't know if it's financially viable, but they're doing it up there, and that would seem to solve a lot of our permitting and environmental problems.
Thank you. I also have three more. Mary Webb, followed by Elizabeth Bettenhausen. Oh, no. Yeah, 4A. Okay. Elizabeth for also another one.
Mary Webb, Cambria. So I also did turn in comments, and I'm glad that they're actually extending the comment period, because it's a lot of documents that had to be read really quickly. Most of what my comments were, now that you've gone ahead and approved money for this project, and there really is no project and everything can change on the project, it seems to me that there's a lot of things you can change on the project. And one of them is that the well 9P7 is clear, perfectly drinkable drinking water. And rather than polluting it with our effluent by throwing all of our effluent on top of that well, that we actually take the sewage effluent and just treat it through the RO plant rather than spraying it onto the field, and then re-injecting that water into your hydraulic mound up at the extraction wells. Of course, if there's enough tracer time for it to travel before we actually extract it again. So that would be one suggestion. The idea about the brine pond, you don't have enough room at that location to have a brine pond that can be solar evaporated by solar means. The brine pond is too small for and it's not brine, it's waste, it's chemical waste. So the pond is too small for the chemical waste. And I've said this in my comments, and if there is any proposal for an ocean outfall because of that pond being too small, it's an absolute non-starter. I mean, that's the fatal flaw in the project. And if people don't fight this project tooth and nail before that point, they will certainly fight it even more so if an ocean outfall is suggested. My husband's comments are basically that there is no wastewater in California. We are a little slow to realize this. So this injection of this 100-gallon per minute water into the lagoon is not enough to improve the lagoon. What is happening is that the 100 gallons per minute is maintaining the lagoon at levels that are already showing a decline for all the habitat in the lagoon. Since you never did baseline studies or in-stream flow studies on either creeks, we don't have the baseline data. We need to know what the species really need to survive in the lagoon. So the 100 gallon per minute is it's just an idea that's thrown out there, but there's no studies that show it is good for steelhead or red-legged frog or tidewater goby. So it's maintaining a level of water, if I can just, here we go. So maintaining water levels that are contributing to the decline of a species is not mitigation. Recovery has to be the goal, not maintenance of the downward trend in population. And he may have said to you, Director Behringer, that he was glad to see that there was water going into the lower lagoon, but basically that was just a recognition by the project engineer that this project is drawing water out of the lagoon. It's also in the project that it's causing saltwater intrusion at that well that is right now perfectly drinkable water. And one of our other suggestions was to try to start now to get the permits to use that 9P7 as a drinking water well. Thank you.
Thank you. And Elizabeth Bettenhausen, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to thank Mary very much for the comments she just made, with which I heartily agree, especially on the ecological consequences of your project. I think it would be very helpful in the future were the board to announce public hearings very clearly and publicly in advance. I found out about this one right now for whatever we are, by reading the back of the Tribune. I never saw, and then eventually it came on the website. There's no public announcement yet on the website about your next agenda item. So a public hearing is a little ambiguous these days in your phrasing of it. What does it mean? I certainly will write comments. I'm very glad to see that you are extending the deadline on this. And I will write comments about Title 22. And I want to suggest a very strong revision of your project and underline what Mary Webb has just said. There is no reason, if you want to have a delicious ice cream cone, to take that delicious ice cream cone, rub it in the mud, and then have a big plant set up to take the mud off so you can have the delicious ice cream cone. If you simply take the percolated effluent from our sewer system and run it through the RO process, you will get as much water to reuse as potable water as your plan. You will not have to take deep aquifer fresh water into RP7. You will not have to take salt water, which if you read Title 22, you'll discover will not replenish itself or recharge. You can just use the effluent, treat it and drink it. You can change the project now to do that. Otherwise, you are asking us not only to build the $8.8 million ice cream bar treatment plant, but to pay you an additional $4.250 million to fund the additional treatment plant that you wouldn't need if you just started treating the stuff we commit down our toilets anyhow. So I will write out my comments, which will be much more detailed, because I'm so glad, I said, where are the appendices? They got put up there, and I thank the staff for that. But they're a little long. They're also not identified. You haven't a clue, looking at that list, what each appendix is about. It's a number. And so you have to go through thousands of pages almost to find out what you're looking for, including, sir, and I'll respond to your email, Mr. President, what that 10% is. That's in the Title 22, when I asked you your source of your 10% salt. I'll get back to you on that. Don't bother.
Pinpoint me to
I'm not
that. I really
distorting
like it.
reality either.
Okay, thank you. That completes public comment. Is this something we're going to defer or?
Again, the Division of Drinking Water staff advised me that you do not need to adopt the report per the agenda title, that you simply receive the comments and then allow further comments to be received up until that August 18th date at 4 o'clock, so that we can pass that on to Division of Drinking Waters and as well as the regional board staff and our project team for consideration.
Okay, so we'll just continue this then?
I've
Go
just
ahead.
have a couple of.
Yes, Director Rice?
First
Doesn't need
one,
to be
I
continued.
didn't know about this report. It wasn't included in our agenda packet. Was there an email that I missed or something? Because I didn't even know that it was on the website. And then the other question is, the comments that are being solicited, are there going to be responses to those from the agents, from the regional board, or from Department of Drinking Water, or whomever the permit's supposed to go for?
Okay, I know and it's easy probably to miss, the notice that got posted on outside of our office and outside the Vets Hall, I believe it was supposed to have been emailed to all the directors back on the July 3rd date, and that did mention our posting it on the website as far as the report. So I think we could have done a better job on this packet if we had more time to make sure you each had a extra copy of the report there.
Or at least
in
a
hard
link.
copy. Yeah, I apologize for that. I think as far as the continuation and so forth, it doesn't need to be continued as far as I understand. And I need to verify with the staffs at the Division of Drinking Water and the Central Coast Regional Water Quality Control Board exactly how they respond to these comments, if it's actually a point-by-point formal response or something they consider as a whole when they start developing the permit conditions. I don't know the details offhand.
Yeah, I don't need to kill trees. I just would have liked to at least have a link. So I looked at this and was a little bit confused.
I want to check with the district clerk. I thought we provided hard copies to all the board members, did we not?
I believe we provided them in binders, the ISMND report and the Title
Oh, yeah.
22 engineers report.
Yeah, it's huge. I remember that one.
And you guys
I looked for it in this. This is the ISMND. I looked for it in here and I didn't see it included. I don't know. Maybe it's probably just an oversight on my part. I've been a little stressed recently.
That's okay. We try to, but we provide you guys with so much information. But again, we'll get it to you if you didn't get it. No problem.
I know it's on the website, so I just wanted to make sure that we, hopefully going forward, doesn't happen again, that's all.
Okay, so then can we move on to item 4B?
Thank you, President Berger. This is a public hearing to consider adoption of the Cambria Emergency Water Supply Project, the ISMND, which is the Initial Study Mitigated Negative Declaration, related to the CCSD's application for regular coastal development permit. The recommendation by staff is that after taking public testimony that the Board of Directors continue this item and direct staff and the CCSD's consultants to further evaluate the comments that have been received by the Initial Study Mitigated Negative Declaration for the regular coastal development permit for the emergency water supply project. And with that, I'll turn it over to Bob if he has anything else to add to it. Or
I really don't have anything to add, Mr. President, unless you wish me to elaborate further. But
Any director's comments?
I just have a
have a question.
procedural question.
We'll start with Amanda because it's going this way.
She always gets a start.
Okay, Amanda,
Go
could you
ahead.
hold your comments?
I'd be
Director
happy to.
Robinette.
Director
No,
Robinette.
go ahead.
Oh, it's Mutual Admiration Society. Thank you, Director Robinette. Procedural question. We take public testimony, continue the item. Will there be public testimony on the day of the continued item? I don't know. Maybe
what's
that's a
that
question
procedure?
for District
There'll
Council.
certainly be the opportunity for more comment.
So this
Any
would-
item on an agenda is subject to public comment.
Okay, so even though it would be continued,
But let's be frank. We really have consultants working on this. We're coming with written response. We're replying in writing to written responses. If we address this again and we get somebody in the public that raises a key issue, that's a different kind of hearing, I believe. So I think this is a good opportunity now to put your written recommendations in your comments so that you can get something responded to. With that said, Director Robinette, and then I have two pieces to
Yes.
speak.
And interestingly and coincidentally, that was pretty much exactly my same inquiry also. And so I just want to clarify, too, that on agenda item 4B, that in fact if somehow our public, there are people here in the community that didn't see this or know about the opportunity to make written comment, that in fact that window can and is still open then if we carry it over? Is that what we're saying?
Yeah, there is a public comment period, and that's, of course, running its course. My understanding of the question was whether people would still be able to comment on it when it comes back. And again, during any agenda item, people have the ability to comment. Also, I don't believe it's unusual for folks to come in with additional comments regarding the propriety of approving a project through the use of a mitigated negative deck at the 11th hour, even after the comment period has expired, so I expect that would occur.
So they could then, if they somehow didn't get to it, they could then continue and submit written comments.
The process typically includes additional comments at the end of the process. When the body, the city council, the board of directors, is considering approving a project using adopting a mitigated negative declaration. It's not unusual for people to come in and still bring in new evidence and assert that a negative declaration isn't appropriate, try to meet the legal standard regarding requiring an EIR and so on. That's a frequent occurrence.
Okay. I have two slips to speak, Elizabeth Bettenhausen, followed by Mary Webb.
Thank you, Mr. President. You all have my report. I sent it to you quite some time back already, my written comments, and I won't read them to you now. Although I think for the edification of those who listen on TV, I might just read my quick summary points right at the beginning.
Sure.
I say that it is a mistake to say that the possible negative effects of this plant have been mitigated sufficiently. And I strongly urge you to have a complete CEQA study of this project done for a multitude of reasons, not the least of which I mentioned at the Prop 218 meeting when I said that there are two words that show up a whole lot in these project reports: unknown and maybe. My summary statements: the definitions of source water and brackish water are inconsistent in your documents from CDM Smith, and the quantity of the individual elements of the extracted brackish groundwater for each definition is unknown. 2, the connections among groundwater and surface water in San Simeon Creek, San Simeon Lagoon, and the water flowing in saltwater intrusion from the Pacific Ocean are unknown. And that's what the CDM Smith study says. We do not know this. 3, membrane filtration removes particulates and biological elements that, according to your documents, foul the equipment that you've just purchased sitting there. But ecological analysis of these elements before and after treatment and disposal is not given. There's no consideration of ecological fouling at all. The composition of the brine is vaguely defined, and the off-site location for the disposal of, quote, super concentrated waste, end quote, is unspecified. Now, if I lived in Kettleman City, which I used to drive through because my family lived in Fresno, we came over here that route, as you probably all know it. If I lived in Kettleman City, I would sure as blazes want to know what the CCSD board is planning to do with this super concentrated waste. And I could fill you in, my report fills you in, I have numbers in the phone book if anybody wants to know about that. But that's pertinent also to one element that's lacking. They say that certainly any earthquake that's going to happen here would be your building to protect again. I would like to see that pond sitting there, not slurp over the berm in a 6.5 earthquake again. I would be the most dumbfounded person on planet Earth. This project does not attend to that need, friends. The description of the mechanical spray evaporator's effects assumes that sound operates unaffected by hills and the Santa Lucia Range. You know as well as I do that sound bounces like crazy here in this town. It assumes that the components of your treatment can be hidden from view at San Simeon Park and the people who drive out that road. And it makes a major assumption that I just find dumbfounding. All of the evaporated air out of that pond from the super waste management is going to be nice, clean, healthy, breathable air. That is an assumption and a half. Well, I could be more detailed about this. I just hope that those people that we hire for 6 months, when this plant gets up and running, we hire them, they're a different firm, but they're going to run the plant for 6 months and train the poor CCSD water people who don't get extra assistance. They have to run that too then afterward. I hope that that keeps in with the laws we've heard today about who owns the property and who runs it if we hire a private firm for 6 months to do it. I could go on, but I assure you that I'm assuming from what was just said by your counsel and you all, that the public hearing will not be closed today. The public hearing will be continued. Otherwise, you've got a very different kind of public comment that can be made.
Thank you.
So Elizabeth did cover a lot of the things I was just going to cover, but
and then Laura's story.
I did do, you know, sort of a history of this project that's not an emergency and the nexus between the state and the federal government because of the fact that so many monies have and agreements have been made with the Army Corps of Engineers with this same project. So we may be under an emergency in the state under CEQA, but we're not in an emergency under the feds under NEPA. So this is where I think these agencies, this interagency meeting is going to be really critical because the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, U.S. Fish and Wildlife, California Department of Fish and Wildlife, California State Parks, but these federal agencies, well, first, they all want to meet. The state agencies are trying to have this meeting because there's all kinds of issues that haven't been addressed. But it's these federal agencies. You're not in an emergency under the federal permitting. So these Section 404 and Section 401 and Section 7 consultation for endangered species is all going to have to happen. I don't understand. Well, and then this water that's going into the lagoon, it's not being fully treated. It's the microfiltration, the MF water, that doesn't go through the secondary process of treatment, and that's just being dumped into San Simeon Creek. So that's going to be a problem. It's not enough water, and then the quality of the water could harm all the wildlife down there. The bromide used for the tracer test, I think, is also of a concern of these federal agencies now because that can also kill plant life or the benthic macroinvertebrates that the fish eat. What I don't understand here is what's the difference between this emergency project and the long-term project? What's the difference between the emergency water supply and the ISMND? I mean, it's the same project, or do you need to be looking for another 8 million, 10 million, 20 million next year for a long-term version of this emergency project just to put in pipelines? You know, I know we read all these things, but the community doesn't know this. They don't understand this. How can they even comment? How could you even say, does anybody agree or disagree with your plan? I mean, there's no way that people are reading these documents the way that we're reading them. I know you talk to people on the street and they have no idea what we're even talking about. So there's a lot of issues, and if this hearing is continuing, are you going to come back with us and give us the results of this interagency meeting and all the suggestions from these different agencies?
I'll ask him.
Thank you.
Laura?
Yeah, Laurel Stewart, Cambria resident. I have a question for Mr. Thompson and Ms. Robinette and Mr. Barringer, Mr. Clift. Ms. Rice, are you receiving regularly the comments that have come in regarding the ISMND? Are you receiving a packet from staff? Are you sending every single comment that comes in?
Yeah, I take a look at them every week. I probably get them.
So did you read one from the Land Conservancy that came in on the 22nd of July
Probably, because I've
regarding build-out reduction? Do you recall
maybe
that,
not.
any of you?
Maybe not.
I'll read it for you. It comes from the Land Conservancy of San Luis Obispo. Dear Mr. Gressens, because staff said that they weren't certain they'd gotten this. He had mailed it or emailed it in on the 22nd. They weren't certain they had gotten this. Do you know now whether or not you got it and sent it on to the directors? Do you have that in your hand, Bob?
I respond to the president, so if the president wants me to respond.
I'll read it. I'll read it. I am writing to you on behalf of the Land Conservancy of San Luis Obispo County. With respect to Cambria Community Services District, proposed emergency water supply project and associated mitigated negative declaration. The Land Conservancy of San Luis Obispo, sorry, it's really tiny print, has its organizational roots in Cambria as the implementer of County Antiquated Lot Retirement Transfer of Development Program 30 years ago. I'm happy to say that through this program, hundreds of substandard lots have been permanently retired into conservation and as such retired the development pressure, including demands on limited water sources. Reviewing the CCSD's project description, it appears that the CCSD is asserting that the pre-existing build-out reduction plan would serve as mitigation for any growth-inducing impacts. Land Use and Planning, page 3.2. The North Coast Area Plan, pages 3.9 and 4.17, states, the CCSD's intent is to incorporate recommendations from the build-out reduction program into the program-level environmental impact report as mitigations to offset the growth-inducing impacts of a new water supply. Although the current permit application is for existing customers, the scope of the permit could be expanded at some future date to cover new additional water service connections. Considering the capacity projected for this facility, it seems unlikely this would only serve existing customers and would not significantly facilitate the creation of new customers. Furthermore, as stated above, the CCSD is asserting that the current build-out reduction plan, which was included in the project review package, would serve as mitigation for any growth-inducing impact. The build-out reduction program and the Land Conservancy of San Luis Obispo's TDC lot retirement program, which are being offered as mitigation, have been inactive for several years, owing largely to failure by the CCSD to honor their agreement with the Land Conservancy of San Luis Obispo and the State Coastal Conservancy. This last point has been brought to the attention of CCSD via letters from the Land Conservancy of San Luis Obispo and the State Coastal Conservancy and has been discussed in detail by the CCSD board. Consequently, the Land Conservancy of San Luis Obispo has not been actively retiring lots despite a continued supply and desire to do so from lot owners. Until the lot retirement program is renewed and the CCSD honors their agreement with the state and the Land Conservancy of San Luis Obispo, it is disingenuous to offer the build-out reduction lot retirement program as a viable mitigation strategy. Respectfully, Daniel Bowman, Conservation Director. So now you have it.
Thank you.
If you didn't have it.
Thank you. Yeah. We close the hearing, is that what we'll do?
Yeah,
No. Oh, how about Director Rice? We'll start with Director Rice and then comments, starting from my left to right.
I'm glad this is going to be continued, and I'm looking forward to having responses to the comments at some point, because there are some good questions that have been raised. Mr. Hirsch, did you want to say something?
I was just going to say, it's certainly up to the board if they want to keep the public hearing open. I wasn't indicating or suggesting that. I was merely indicating that this has been circulated in accordance with the requirements of CEQA. There's a comment period, and it's not unusual for comments to come in at the 11th hour when the public body is considering approval of a mitigated negative deck, and I would expect that to happen again. But certainly, if the board wants to keep this open, this is being referred back to staff and to the consultants and we'll see what comes out of that process. But I wasn't suggesting keeping it open, but it's up to the board. If the board wants to do so, they certainly can.
Director Clift?
Yeah, that was my question too, was whether the public hearing aspect would be continued or just public comment, because I think there may be a perception of the difference between those two, and I don't see any reason why we can't continue the public hearing to the next meeting. and then have have whatever final public hearing there is, and then close public hearing. Because if we close public hearing today, or give the impression that the only thing might be just a public comment, you know, I agree with you, there's probably not a lot of difference in it at the last second, but I still think it's probably best to leave it as open as a public hearing.
Director Robinette?
Well, yes, that was my concern is that if it's open as a public hearing, that people that haven't submitted written comments yet can still do that, or they can come and make oral comments here on the date that we review it.
Seeing no further comment, I guess we can just adjourn?
Do we have to make a motion, or we just?
Do we move or anything?
I think it would be appropriate to have a
Okay.
motion.
I'm looking for a motion to continue this.
I move to continue the public hearing to,
I don't think there's a date certain. This is being referred back to staff and the consultants to evaluate.
To a future date.
The extensive comments that have been made.
And could we include in that just that clarification that so written comment can continue to be received until the public hearing?
yeah, that's fine.
Is that all right?
Did you get the motion, Monique?
You're going to second?
I'll second it.
Okay. All in
Do
favor?
wait, do you need the motion back? Monique, did you get it?
Okay.
Yeah.
So why don't you repeat your motion?
I move that we continue the public hearing to a future date and allow for continued written comments on the ISMND.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? With that done, we're adjourned.